Now, keep in mind, and I want everybody to know, I prepared the one in the pants holster, unloaded. I checked it 75 times outside of Starbucks, which is amazing that I didn't get arrested right there. But it is what it is. I know this one's unloaded. I walk through, say hi to his assistant, walk into his office, open up, he's on the phone, walk up with it, unload it, put it to his head and say, "You are dead. We need to do something about security."
You know, Jim, for years, I've had to refer to you as my guy, in air quotes. So, like, when shit hits the fan, people know to text me because Julian's got a guy who's got some guys, but they don't know who the guy is. And the guy did a lot of things that are interesting in the government, but we don't really talk about it. And so the weird thing about having a podcast is now I bring the guy, like you, to light.
I like it. You know, like I told your dad, I'm Ray Donovan without the killing. Anymore.
I have said that before. I have fully admitted. I'm like, you watch Ray Donovan? And they're like, yeah, I heard that. I'm like, all right, that's Jim.
Yeah, pretty much. But my brother's a little bit more normal than his brothers, I would say. But yeah, definitely. Hey, this is something I've been thinking about, like how to define yourself, right? After you have a career of public service, it's not easy.
How can you even do that? Because we'll talk about it today. But you've done so many different things, you know?
Yeah, it's different things. And I think the biggest thing that I struggled with coming out was how do you value yourself, right? Yeah. Because government work, no matter how hard you work, and let's face it, it's the 2/3 rule, not as much in the military, but in the government, 2 out of 3 do the job. They do the work. They're dedicated to it. And then you have the one guy who likes to carry the badge, likes to wear the gun, do the crossword puzzle, and talk about everybody else's successes. So it's a struggle, right? So now, no matter how hard you work, that guy and other guys who are in the 2/3 make the same paycheck. You're maxed out. $188, $768, and 12 cents when I left. I don't know what it is now.
But people don't. I mean, you're obviously going to get promotions above that kind of guy, no?
Promotion is in title only and responsibility. The money is the same.
It's the same.
It's the same money. So now when you get to a level of what they call senior executive service, then you can make a little bit more, but it's not much. The only benefit really is at the end of your career when you're done, they'll move your stuff back to a place that you choose.
Well,
so, think about that.
You spent your entire quote-unquote adult life after the Army, which is a whole nother thing, with just the FBI, right?
Yeah, short stint in corporate America.
For what, 5 minutes?
5 minutes. Yeah. I went into it thinking I had to do it for myself so that I could someday not look back and say, why the hell didn't I try this? And so did it. Great company. The company's pretty successful now. I really don't have any second thoughts about it or regrets, honestly.
This is what, like 30 years ago? Something like that?
Yeah, probably, early to mid-90s time frame. No, it's after that, but mid-90s, let's say. Took the position, knew from literally minute one. It's like, what the hell am I doing? And, went back to my people at the Bureau and said, listen, I'm ready. I'm ready. And we went from there. And, got back in, was happier than I could possibly have ever thought I could be after great experiences in the Army, with great experiences at West Point.
Now how'd you end up at West Point? Because I think sometimes we don't separate the two a little bit, and I think that's important to do because not that all service isn't amazing. It is, especially now because it's not a draft. People volunteer,
right.
Sacrifice their life. It's an unbelievable thing. But it is a different level when you do that at age 17, sign that letter, and go to the most prestigious historical place to do it, in West Point. And you also, I guess, then, a lot of those guys come out Rangers and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of a different level. But it has always seemed to me like West Point shaped every single thing you did afterwards. And we'll get into the Bureau, but it seems like not just the bond and the camaraderie and everything, but the sense of duty that you got from there has carried into everything you do.
Absolutely. I was brought up in a service-oriented family. My dad, one of 7, grew up with nothing, streets of Newark. his brothers aged, in range from he being the oldest boy, he had a sister who was a little bit older, down to his youngest brother, who's only 10 years older than my brother at this point. So it's interesting. So my dad was a service guy, and he kind of ingrained that in us. I think it was inherent in him. Shouldn't have been, to be honest, if you look at his family background. And, interesting. You and I have talked about this story, but I show up at the FBI Academy, and one of the professors, first couple of weeks, says, "Hey, guys, you really need to kind of do some research on other federal agencies. You want to understand other federal agencies because there's going to come a time when you're going to have to collaborate with them."
They told you that?
Yeah. Go check it out. Go take a look.
You can imagine why I'm pretty surprised at that.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely. But I mean, I think that at that point, this is early to mid 90s. Things were starting to come together with regards to the terrorism portion of investigations. I mean, didn't come together all so well.
No. That's why I'm surprised at it.
But, I remember thinking, well, my dad was an arson investigator, so I think I'm going to go check the ATF out, see what they're about. So I walked down into the old-fashioned Quantico library. I think Hoover had built it and stacked it and coordinated it. And I find this book called, I think it was Very Special Agent, something like that. It was The History of the ATF. So I pull the book, it's paperback, and I'm walking back to my room, and I'm flipping through it. I'm like, holy shit. I get to the first picture in the book. Frank Slim DiOrio.
Oh, my God.
And underneath it says, the most notorious bootlegger in New Jersey history. My Uncle Frank.
No shit.
So I look, I kind of like, holy cow. And remember, no cell phones, no nothing. So I walk upstairs to the room, myself and my roommate there, great guy from Columbia, South Carolina. See, Howie, I got to use the phone. Can you step out for a minute? So I dial my parents' number, and my dad had passed a short time before that. My mother answers, and I say, "Mom, I'm looking at a book about the ATF." She says, "What's that?" I said, "Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms." She said, "Oh, God, Uncle Frank."
Oh, man.
So I said, "Mom, did you think it might have been important to tell me about Uncle Frank?"
They didn't hit that on the background check?
Right, they didn't hit it. So she said, "Well, here's my mother, typical. Jimmy, we didn't want to make you nervous." So now
what was
his dilemma, right?
What was his full story, though?
So straight up bootlegger down in Elizabeth Harrison, Newark, New Jersey. So I always knew
which family.
Not really sure I never really took a look after that, especially during my time in the bureau. You checking indices and those things, not a great thing to do. So I talked to my brother a little bit. We both really didn't have the full story, but we figured they were kind of on their own. I know my grandfather was an olive oil guy.
Of course he was. Yeah.
Right. So who ran the numbers?
Yep.
But at the same time, we were proud of the family. Everybody was hardworking. But my dad was the guy who kind of went off in the service direction. Nobody else really did. Military, police, fire department, arson squad, FBI's National Academy as an arson investigator. Probably the first. I think he was the first fireman to ever go through the 10-week program.
Oh, wow.
At 50. After major heart attack. So
wait, he didn't take it up till then?
He didn't take it up till then. The National Academy kind of brings in executives from around the country, law enforcement. So that's why the fire department was kind of unique.
Right.
Brings those guys in, and it kind of teaches the FBI way, and it's a perfect, if you think about it, brilliant. It's a Hoover. Now, listen, I'm not saying Hoover was brilliant at all, but what I'm saying, it was perfect coordination in that he basically sold the FBI to senior law enforcement officials so that at some point when he needed someone, whether it be in Kansas City, LA, or in the Philippines, he would have that person. So my dad went through this program, and I remember sitting at graduation of my dad's graduation. I was a high school sophomore, I think, and thinking to myself, man, I got to do like this guy is hustling. He's 50. He had a massive heart attack. He's out here running 3 miles a day. I gotta get off my ass. This isn't about, hanging out and having a couple beers and thinking about, where I'm going to play Major League Baseball. By the way, that never happened, obviously. But so that's what kind of got me rolling a little bit on the service piece. And I think it just, once it got rolling, it kind of made sense.
But that was later, though, because
a little bit
when you
later.
were at Quantico.
Yeah, I mean, that was at Quantico, but it got me thinking back to how
Got
the
it.
West Point piece kind of came to be.
Yeah,
right?
because you fell into that. I don't want to say fell into that, but they recruited you for baseball, so it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm not going to not go to West Point.
Well, I did. I did. I mean, I can remember my grandmother, who didn't speak the best English, gets a phone call. I'm a high school senior. Now I'm probably like January of my senior year of high school, and I'm already kind of focused on playing baseball at Seton Hall. I'm gonna go play baseball at Seton Hall. Talked to everybody. It looked really good. I think we were, getting a little bit of money. So
Hometown kid, too.
It was good, right? Yeah. So that's my focus. So my grandmother tells my father one night at dinner, I got a call from the Army. I don't know. I can't remember if she said it in Italian, if she said it, whatever. She showed him the message. And my dad said, oh, really? Well, my dad said, well, the Army. Now, my brother at the time was in the Army. So my brother was he actually went through a program where the Army paid for his dental school. And then I think he owed maybe a year for a year, one for one. So he was in. So we had that going. And my dad says, I don't know. My dad's thinking maybe a recruiter, right?
Yeah.
And trying to enlist me into the service.
Pops was right.
Right. So we blow it off, right? Both of us.
Ooh.
Guy calls back the next day. Or
you blew off West Point.
Not knowing, because my grandmother didn't make the translation, So a couple days later, my dad answers the phone. And the guy says, hey, I'm Coach Permikoff. I'm the West Point baseball coach. And we'd really like Jim to come on a visit. So my dad comes back to me and says, Jimmy, I think you should go. I said, no, Dad, it's the Army. I'm not doing that. We just talked about that yesterday. Yeah. And he said, no, this is a little different. You don't have to make any decision. You don't have to talk about it, now. But let's make the visit. We owe that to them. And so I did. I went up, and the rest is history. I mean, I couldn't get in that year. It was late. They offered me a spot at West Point's prep school, which gave me an experience I'll never forget. I had probably the best baseball coach I've ever had in my life there, a guy named Eddie McRae, still coaching. So Eddie and I hit it off.
So wait, you wouldn't have been in the class of 86 then?
No, I would have been an 85 guy. So
wow, funny how that worked out.
How lucky am I to have, listen, I love the 85 guys, but
86 is like their all-time class.
It's just incredible what's going on.
And
who continues to go on.
Who are some of your guys from that class?
Well, I think the timing of today is important to talk about my main man, and that's Terry Finley, who owns West Point Thoroughbreds, right? So Terry won the Derby in 2017 with Always Dreaming, and he's got a horse on Saturday, O Bezos, coming out of the 6th position. And
is that named after Jeff Bezos?
I don't think so, but I don't know. I didn't do enough research. Who the hell knows? It's definitely not named after.
Yeah, I was going to say. That's interesting.
But, so Finley is a guy who's a Kentucky Derby winner, right? Mm-hmm. So, and a dear friend, and goes back to way, way back, to the time that he actually signed me up for jazz dance. Huh. What happens at West Point is you're supposed to, by a certain time, back in the day, you had to fill out a card, and you had to bring it up to this place, and then they would take and look how many people are in golf, how many people are in tennis. Now, we were older. We were seniors. So, hey, you want to get golf. You want to get tennis, right? You want to get, whatever, putting your feet in the pool, whatever. You don't want to get jazz dance. You really don't want to get jazz dance.
You weren't tearing up the floor, Jim?
Wasn't tearing it up. So Terry signs me up, gets my card, brings it up. I'm the only male in a class of probably 25 female cadets, my classmates, and me.
Were they hot?
No. Well, yes, some of them. I got to be careful what I say. And here I am, and we're going to perform Cats, the musical Cats.
No.
And the rest just lines itself up, right? I mean, it just doesn't get any worse than that for me. So Finley, fuck you. I'll tell you that right now for doing that. But we've remained best friends. He's one of the 5 that I talk about all the time with the texts all day. Yeah. Right. So Finley's a guy, right? Then
who's your roommate?
So my Beast Barracks guy, which is the first 6 weeks at West Point, is Mike Pompeo, right? So guy we know.
Former Secretary of State.
Former Secretary of State, former Director of CIA, former congressman from I think it was the 1st District in Kansas. Mm-hmm. So
you
interesting guy.
know some extra shit.
Mike,
I know you're holding back. I know you're
Mike's a
holding
great
back.
guy.
Okay.
Mike's a great guy. And funny dude, number one in our class. One of those guys that, never really showed that he was working hard, but I know he was working hard. And
yeah, he had an interesting path too.
Absolutely.
You know?
Total interest. I think the common misconception about Mike is that everything came easy, right? And I think that's a problem with a lot of service academy guys in general. And I say that, and you and I have talked about this before, right? Yeah. The problem, what we all have in common, all of us, is that we don't think we're good enough.
At West Point.
Anywhere. And it goes back to what you and I just talked about earlier today.
But you've talked about it in the context, I just want to make sure I understand it. You've talked about that in the context of like, that's a real thing at West Point. Like even these guys who are very, very successful.
It's a real thing.
That's their number one like weakness. Like,
and that's my opinion. I've talked to some buddies that have said and offer that same opinion. But I think that's the issue with value, right? Like we talked about value. Like, I come out, after the FBI had some job offers, right? Had some CSO, some chief security officers, some CISO offers, chief intelligence officers, basically. And I looked at them hard. I really did, because I tried to say, how do I squeeze this into what I really want to do? And the money was good. The job position was good, but at the end of the day, I'm like, I can't help people. I just can't. I can help a company, help one guy, right? I want to be able to continue the impact.
You're a cowboy.
I like it. I like the impact. I like the day-to-day, right? I like seeing people go, oh, shit, you just took that off my plate, man. Thank you. Even if they don't say it, I know I did. I know that we did something, just stuff that happens every day still. And that's what keeps me kind of pulling myself out of bed in the morning. It's like if I went, I've still, and we've talked about this, right? I've interviewed for a couple jobs since J3's been kind of around, and I really was fired up about it. Like, holy shit, I'm going to be the guy, I'm going to be on TV, and I'm going to go. And then I thought about it. I'm like, I would absolutely hate that. Hate it.
You know what, though? My takeaway is when I hear the stories, and we're just going to go in a loop today. We'll go all over the place because you're going to be a regular here because you're my guy for a lot of reasons and on a lot of foreign policy things, on a lot of domestic policy things. Like there's a lot of stuff you have your ear to the grindstone on that no one else does. So it's pretty valuable that I get to have someone like that on the pod. But looking at your FBI career, to jump around to that for a second, when I first was getting to know you, right after you left the FBI and retired from there to open J3 Global, the stories you would always tell were way different types of investigations. I mean, your background, and I don't know how much of the first part you can even get into, but you spent 15 years undercover in vastly different things. Like it wasn't like the same character, you weren't Donnie Brasco in 5 different families. Like that's not really how it was going. You were doing one thing here, one thing there, I'll let you decide whether or not to talk about that again. But, after that, you were this international interrogator, the guy walking on the ship and telling Captain Phillips he could have it back. You were a guy who was running everything from like fraud in, some of the communities in New York City. I forget some of them, like Garment District and stuff like that. And then you're running some mafia stuff. You're running some terrorism stuff. There seemed to be no like set, hey, this is my role and this is what I do. You were constantly moving to some sort of new challenge. Yeah. So when I hear about all these major jobs, and I know you can't really say what some of them are, but they're enormous jobs you're getting offered by very, very big places. And, if people were just looking at the paycheck, of course you'd take it. But the reason that strikes me that you're not going after that stuff is because it keeps you in that one-dimensional setting. You don't, even if there are new challenges every day, which there are, in those jobs there are challenges every single day, they're still in the same family of challenges. It's not like, whoa, that one's cool, I want to try that. It's almost like you want to touch the coffee until it's hot. Like, all right, let's go see what this one's about.
Exactly. I mean, I think you make a great point, and that's what kind of drew me to kind of moving around in the Bureau, right? Trying to seek out the best opportunities, the most impactful opportunities. And I've talked to you about this. At the end of every one of my cases, which I would say probably a couple of hundred different people that I crossed and touched in certain ways, some not so good, some really good. I only had one person in 21 years not shake my hand when it was over.
On the criminal side.
Think about that, right? So, and do you know, to this day, it's a thought every day.
What do you mean?
Not a long thought, but like, what happened? Why didn't he, did I? That kind of stuff. And at the end of the day,
I don't follow that.
So kind of like all the other jobs I did, I felt like I had closure, with the handshake. You're going away for 20 years, or you're going away for 4 years, or you're cooperating with the Bureau. We're going to spend the next 6 years together, going and making more cases. Okay, DiOrio, you were professional. You made a difference in my life. You helped to get me in some cases on Team USA or back on Team USA to feel like I was making a difference.
Telling you this.
Yeah, right. And there was one guy that told me after I counseled him in front of his attorney, don't go to trial. You're going to get convicted. You're going to get convicted. He went. Guess what? Not only did he get convicted, but he had his 2 children perjure themselves on a witness stand, right? So when it was over, he and his wife looked at me as he wasn't remanded, because the federal program, especially white collar, you're not going to get remanded to prison, right? You're going to have some time to get things in order. And as they're walking out of the courtroom, the wife turns to me and says, I hope you die an awful death. And I looked at her and I said, is there any other kind?
What'd she say?
And so, nothing. She just walked off, And so when we showed up for sentencing, he got a pretty significant sentence for a corruption / white collar case. Pretty significant. Normally that stuff, a couple years in jail, a big fine, a lot of restitution, probation, and a convicted felon, right?
They go to a country club prison.
Yeah, I mean, country club, or there's spots where it sucks. Listen, they lock a door behind you.
Yeah.
And that's that, right? So,
but it's not Florence ADX.
You're not in danger,
right?
Except for yourself. You're in danger of yourself, right?
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I kind of thought to myself, like, what the hell happened? And now I don't think about it as much anymore. But is there something I could have done different? But no, I mean, I sat in front of his attorney and told him, "Don't go to jail. Don't go to trial."
You think it's just very curious.
Bothers me
that kind of guy bothers you though, because that's one of your white. I mean, those were big cases, but those are one of your white collar ones. You're dealing with people who don't view themselves in a criminal light. Whereas when you're going after terrorists, when you're going after people in the mafia, when you're going after people who are part of major racketeering type investigations or doing wild shit, drugs, whatever, you're dealing with some stone cold murderers.
Yeah.
Even some of those guys who shook your hand too.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, hey, let's put it this way. Some of the guys that I talk to overseas, they're not shaking your hand. They're basically telling you, I'm going to kill you if I can, right? And my answer was always, no fucking way, because you're never getting out of here, right? So now, I mean, of course, we've had presidents that have talked about letting them out, but whatever. I don't want to go down that path. Sorry, Mike. So, it's kind of like my thought was always, if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. If you're going to go against me and I'm going to go against you, because that's what the Constitution says we're supposed to do. When you commit a crime, I'm supposed to collect evidence that protects the interests of the United States and pass it on to a prosecutor, what Jim Comey didn't do. But at the same time, be a grizzly. If you're going to be a mobster, be a mobster. The first mobster I ever arrested, pretty laid back guy.
Who was it? You can't say.
Yeah, we won't talk about it, right? Yeah. But we get him into the office. And there's a processing area. So you're printing.
Yep.
And taking photos. You're running his criminal history. You're trying to talk to him or talk at him more. Because most of them just, hey, I want a lawyer. But doesn't mean when they say they want a lawyer, doesn't mean that you can't talk at them. Listen, I understand. I'm not going to ask you any questions. But I want you to hear.
That's how you talked at him?
I want you to hear what we have. I think it's only fair that you hear what we have.
I don't know if I believe you on that.
I'm telling you.
Jim,
listen.
You're the guy in Goodfellas who's like, what, are we baking a fucking cake? We baking a fucking cake, my man?
I used to bake.
That's you.
I mean,
Come on.
No. So Anyway, this guy, calm as calm can be, doesn't really, no response. Zero, just sits there. In comes the special agent in charge. He kind of walks by. Now, he's not part of it. He liked the weird dude, right? He liked the coffee in the processing room better than
he was one of the 1/3. He was the
right?
1/3.
Asshole, right? So he walks by. Now, funny thing is, my dad had always said, never trust a man whose hips are wider than his shoulders. Well, this guy's hips were wider than his shoulders. Now, picture the mobster just sitting there. He's kind of sitting there listening, taking it all in, not showing me any sign of comprehension and or, his desire to speak. And he looks over and he says, man, that dude's fucking hips are wider than his shoulders. And my brain racks back to my dad saying, and I'm like, that's got to be a mafia expression. And I bet you he heard it from Uncle Frank.
Probably.
Right? So that kind of, I guess, mind game against a guy like that, against a mobster who's seen it all, done it all. He's basically in a combat situation, but on the streets of Newark and Patterson and Jersey City, probably a lot sicker than he wants to be. And I've got to try to find a way in a short amount of time to get him to understand the case that we have against him without being able to ask him a question. Nothing wrong with that.
Well, let me ask you.
Listen, there's some defense attorneys out there that are going to say that's absolutely wrong, DiOrio, but they're fine with it because they knew that we could talk, right? I'm never going to get pissed off. It's never personal. I'm not going to be pissed at, so-and-so defense attorney because he, said DiOrio's an idiot or brought something up at trial about my methods.
You're not forcing them to say anything.
Absolutely
you're
not. Just telling them what you have, man.
Yeah, you're not torturing them.
If I arrested you for something, wouldn't you want to know what I had on you before you talk to your attorney? Because you're thinking, it's probably, especially a guy like that, a mobster.
Yeah.
He's thinking, oh shit, it could be 150 different things. Which one do you have, DiOrio? Which one did you get?
There's a lot to unpack here because you also said something. You started off that whole thing talking about if you're a grizzly bear, be a grizzly bear.
Damn,
and you talked about like if you're a mobster, be a mobster.
Be a mobster.
And it all goes back because I think about this a lot of the concept of like the cops need the criminals and the criminals need the cops. There's the game there, and working at the FBI, you're at one of the top agencies in the country. And it's a huge step up above being in a police force or something like that. But it still operates the same way. Everything trickles from the top, and the top wants numbers. The top wants results. The top says, okay, how many convictions did we get? How many crimes were committed? So they can go report it publicly to the politicians who are responsible for it, who got to go win office. So.
And the continuing resolution, right, to get paid. So the budget stays
100, it always comes back to the money. Absolutely. So thank you for adding
Follow
that.
the money.
But you are in there making these cases that oftentimes, like they're always sent across your desk. And the job is, and this is what I think about a lot, the job is get a result. Like there isn't this thing where the higher ups, or at least how we see it in pop culture, and correct the record if you can here, but there isn't this thing where the higher ups put a case across your desk and say, hey, if they're innocent, let's prove it. Let them go. It's always like, oh, what can we do? And so I even think about it with an extreme example, like a mobster who very clearly has done a whole bunch of shit. Like, that's not a good example of like, oh, is this guy innocent? Like, duh. Okay, he did this stuff. But, you're wired to, when these guys come in, to have to state their case to them. And I always think about it from outside the legal system as someone who knows nothing about that, just thinking like, well, if you have the case, isn't it just going to get proven in court? Like, unless you have a shitty lawyer? So what is even the pressure to have to tell the guy the case? I wouldn't, at least psychologically, I would think, well, tell him nothing. Who cares?
No, you make a great point, and I think the thing that we kind of left out, which we're getting to, there's two parts, right? So first off, you got to present this case to the United States attorney who has to prosecute it, and we kind of touched on that for a minute. But secondly, you're always, always, always trying to recruit and nurture cooperators. Always. So the laziest agents, that one out of that three, is the person who takes information from a very valuable source and does nothing with it, doesn't present it, doesn't kind of go through, analyze, doesn't, kind of tear it out and prioritize it How can I corroborate this independently? This sounds really good. What they do, not all the time, but what happens often is they don't discuss it with somebody in charge or somebody who's built a reputation for making cases, a case maker, a rainmaker in the Bureau. What they do is they bring it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They find a pretty liberal, that's wrong. I can't say that. They find a young federal prosecutor and they present the case in a fashion where he or she can only say, "Wow, we're not taking it. Sounds ridiculous," right? So think about that. So that's a lazy agent. So when I say that, what I'm thinking about is the reason for talking at these people is because you might, in their mind, flip a switch that says, "Damn, I might be able to get myself out of this mess." And it's changed from even the time I went into the Bureau till now.
Well,
right?
you're missing a big piece here too. And maybe you're not, but to me, like from the outside, it seems like an enormous piece as to your mindset there is that you spent those 15 years undercover. Your job was to go make friends, even like as an actor, with people, right?
Yeah,
people around the
in
targets.
and out of that,
yes.
like we talked about, not in it all the time, right? So you're in and out of that situation. So maybe you get better. Maybe your skills are tuned because sometimes it's a matter of life or death, right? Literally. So I think you're right, but I think the key to it, there's two different kinds of informants. There's guys that we pay. And that's the motivation because we always talk about following the money.
Yep.
But there's guys that are jammed really good. So you're telling them what they're jammed about because you're not going to pay some asshole like, whatever, Tony the Cripple, right? You're not going to do that. But what you're going to do is offer him through your thoughts where he can help, where he's got that missing piece. Kind of what I'm doing for J3 now.
Yeah.
Finding the missing piece for people so that we can kind of put this to rest or mitigate so that you, as my client, have peace of mind so you can do what you're supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to be looking about what is the problem with your life or your business. I'm supposed to do that now. I did it for years for $188, $718, and 12 cents. Now I do it for a little bit more, which is nice.
Were you FBI or were you CIA?
No comment.
No comment?
I'm not talking about that. You know that.
No. Okay. All right. Well, that's actually more info than I thought. Because this is from the outside.
We cross over, right? We cross over. So you're overseas. You're over after 9/11, especially, right? So you're overseas. You're overseas.
Yeah.
You're overseas. You're overseas, right? So think about that. Just by the definition of what we do now. You talk to.
Did that change the FBI? That's the question.
100%. 100%. It had to.
Their approach to criminals.
Had to.
Because you just talked about, the reason I asked this is, and then you even mentioned exactly what I wanted to go to. So a little bit of same wavelength there between the two of us. But after 9/11, I guess they put more of an emphasis in the FBI on taking assets and actually forming assets, which is what, the complaint of the CIA, and that's a whole thing I would love to talk to. Maybe we'll get to it today, maybe we won't. But the whole build-up to 9/11, if people never watched The Looming Tower.
Very good show.
It's a book.
Well
it's
done.
A great book.
Yep,
and then
well done.
Brilliant show.
John O'Neill, they played it to the T.
Yes. So John O'Neill was an FBI agent who really saw Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda rising and coming, and he couldn't work with the CIA because the CIA basically put up a wall to him because the reputation was that the FBI just likes to run around and get an arrest, whereas the CIA did what you're talking about, which is form assets, get information, you bring in people who you think are high on the chart, and they're not really high on the chart. There's a lot of big sharks above them, so how do we get to the big sharks? We use the little fish like them and get there.
Absolutely. That is the key. And I will say that the agents who saw that, and there's guys and girls that saw that well before 9/11, and I have a soft spot for it because my situation. You know that I married a 9/11 widow, a good guy who just went to work. Yeah. Dude went to work and they blew him up, right? And we had information. We did. And we presented it to one of those 1/3ers. Fuck. If I would have got that, well, I'm not saying anything could have happened differently, but if I would have got that, I think I would have moved it up the chain in a different form. I wouldn't have like my dad used to, I wouldn't let him say no. And that was my blessing and my curse in the FBI. I wouldn't let people say no. And I used to say, there was this old adage in the Bureau, you know, and you hear it in other portions of life, that guy, you know, is just a complete empty suit. So treat him like a mushroom.
Feed him shit, keep him in the dark.
There you go, right? And that's the danger of people who don't understand people and can't make that determination as to who you need to trust to move stuff up the ladder, right? So 9/11 did change, at least it brought to light two things. First off, the importance of assets and sources. Secondly, the importance of following the money. Because I don't care, with very few exceptions, very, very few exceptions, mostly, God forbid, this you know, these mass shootings, right? You get a nut like that. There's ways to do it. Now, we've talked about ways to do it that I think would definitely help to deter and diminish these kooks, but they're lone wolves, and you're not going to find any money because it doesn't matter because they're not doing it for the money. But everybody else, terrorist finance unit was developed after 9/11. After 9/11, and most of the guys I work with, no, a little bit. We used to. This is, and I'm going to say this, and I don't really care. Right? We used to look at the terrorism agents in every office, no matter where I was. If I was traveling out in L.A., if I was in Seattle, if I was in El Paso, if I was in Chicago, if I was in Newark, if I was in New York. And we used to say, man, you can't find one of those dudes after 2 o'clock. You know why? And it was the place that we sent. It was the, what's that from one of the Christmas specials? The Land of Misfit Toys.
Oh yeah.
Right? They send the Jack in the Box that can't pop up. They sent the dentist, the kid, the Herbie, the dentist, right? That's where we sent these guys because, listen, nothing's happened. Nothing's happened.
What about like when Kenya happened in '97, and then
the bombings were the first kind of wake up.
USS Cole,
the Cole, those things. You know, yes, you know, even McVeigh, right, blowing up the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Yeah. Right. But
now was he kind of a lone wolf though?
No, he had some help. My belief. Okay. I don't know that, but I believe he had help. I believe there was another guy that we were kind of looking at during the time that cashed him.
In fairness to the argument, though, he wasn't like Al Qaeda.
No.
Right? Whereas in the 90s.
No, he was a nut. He was a military guy, right?
Al Qaeda was moving and
shaking, right?
They were moving.
So I think there's a lot. Listen, we have so much. There's so much on the bone here for this particular portion. But
let's go. Let's chew it off.
You know, my thought with regards. What was the last thing we were talking about? Like
follow the money.
Following the money, right? And kind of considering the
pull that mic in a little bit.
Yeah. Considering the two different ways that the two opportunities that we have following that money and then also establishing and developing and nurturing assets/sources. You're going to get some, and knowing how to work with that, knowing what to do with it. A whole bunch of information. What do I do? We got to analyze it. We have analysts in the FBI, right? Mueller. The one good thing Mueller did, and we used to joke, it was no longer the Federal Bureau of Investigations. It was the Federal Bureau of Intelligence, because he switched us to an intelligence agency. You know what though?
Because he was right after. He was right after 9/11.
He was during, right after, during it, right? So, I think Louis Freeh was gone. By the way, the best person. I wish he. You know, was able to take the FBI over again. One of the greatest men and greatest patriots in the country.
What made him great as the leader of the FBI?
So here's my thought, right?
Yeah.
What better for an organization like the FBI than to come up through the ranks of the FBI?
Yeah.
What better? You know why?
And he was an attorney, too.
He was an attorney. He was a federal prosecutor. He took down the Pizza Connection case, the heroin case, and the pizza tins.
That's a wild...
Think about that.
That's a wild fucking case.
Dude just destroyed it and wasn't
afraid. Can you tell people what that case was?
Yeah, I mean, basically it was... And I can't remember the group that was doing it, but it was mob-oriented, and they were using pizzerias in order to...
It was the Zips. It was out of Sicily. So it was I think it was like Badalamenti and all that.
That's right. Yeah. I think they wind up assassinating an Italian judge.
What's his name?
Killed him.
Giovanni Falcone.
Yes.
Yeah,
who's got a monument at Louis Freeh. Louis Freeh was great friends with him.
I forgot that because he was tight with Louis and I guess like Rudy
there's a monument in Quantico.
Yep.
So Louis.
That was crazy.
So Louis is just, I miss Director Freeh. I haven't been able to see him in the last few years. I'm very good friends with his oldest son. who is a chip off the old block, as all boys, all 6 of Louis' Director Free's boys are chips off the old block. They're former SEAL team guys. They're Naval Academy grads. So you can't have everything, right? So, by the way, what do every West Pointer and Annapolis graduate have in common?
Nothing.
They all got into the Naval Academy. Leave it at that. Beat Navy.
Okay. But back on to the point we were making about following the money.
Yeah.
When you are making sources as opposed to making arrests, those trails don't stop. And like one of my obsessions, and this is why this topic's great because we're bringing it out of the Al-Qaeda thing, but one of my obsessions is the rise of Al-Qaeda and how that happened. And by the way, and this is something I haven't looked at in like the last year, but we never got al-Zarqawi. Doctor's still doing his thing over there. And, one of the best things ever happened to that guy was when ISIS took all the press off them. Because, look, these people are sadistic. It's a terrorist organization. Any terrorist organization is sadistic. Doesn't mean they're not smart as shit. And some of them I'm sure are very stupid. But some of them were smart as shit. And Osama bin Laden was pretty fucking smart. He was a guy who had a sick and twisted view on the world and used it for evil. But what he pulled off, you needed to have people in the 90s, even like the late 80s when there were the first little sparks of it. You needed to have people at all the agencies trying to figure out who they were going to become friends with there, not voluntarily, obviously, who were going to be able to get them to a guy like that. Instead, what we tried to do was this hands-off agency versus agency thing where the CIA was saying, no, we're not giving anything to the feds because the FBI is just going to arrest people. The FBI wants to go in and arrest them. And then all these these attacks start happening and then boom.
And we had a sign. We had the 93 bombing. Same guy.
Yeah.
Same guy.
Yeah, and they said they wanted to come back and quote, I believe the exact quote was, we're going to finish the job.
Don't worry about it. We'll get there. There's a story about some agent that had that guy and was interrogating him and flew him in a chopper from...
Over New York.
Over New York. And when they passed by the Trade Center, they said to him, to the pilot, circle, and they removed his hood. And they said, quote, they're still standing, motherfucker. Yeah. And he looked in one of the agent's eyes and said, not for long.
Yeah.
And we did nothing about it.
Did nothing about it. And that's what John O'Neill was so pissed about.
Yeah. And we had a guy that wrote a 65-page electronic communication. We call it an EC in the Bureau. It's not an now it's evidentiary, but used to just be kind of a status report. Or a lead to be sent to another field office. We had a guy write a 60-plus page report about individuals who only wanted to learn how to fly the airplane. They didn't care about taking off or landing. And we presented it to a one-thirder. And guess what happened? The fucking towers blew up.
One of those guys was one who didn't show up that day. He was in jail for life. Now I forget his name. You know who I'm talking about, though? That's how they caught him, because he's like, I'm not interested in landing. Like, he literally said it.
To Moussaoui?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Moussaoui, the 20th guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, 20th guy. Yeah, I think that's right. So if you think about the perfect storm, and this is emotional for me because, I think you and I had talked about Adam Schefter, right? Adam Schefter, the dude who does the NFL.
Adam Schefter.
Yeah. ESPN, right? I say it wrong. But he wrote this book, and it's called The Man I Never Met. And the book is a powerful piece. And Schefter married a woman who was a 9/11 widow, whose husband, Joe Mayo, died in the towers at Cantor, probably feet from Jim Martello.
Really? I haven't heard about this book.
It changed my life. And one of the greatest quotes in the book is when he talks about the fact that without even knowing, this guy made a life for me. He made a life for his family without even knowing. And when I think about that, you know, it kind of brings a tear to my eye. And you think about that and the fact that this guy, you know, went out and he wanted to meet Joe Mayo's parents. He wanted to meet Joe Mayo's siblings. He wanted to meet all of Joe Mayo's friends and talk to them about why it was so important to the memory in his home of Joe Mayo, right? And I kind of think about that every day, right? Because one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, and you think about all the things I've done, is being a stepdad.
Yeah.
Right? Because I've always been in control wherever I was.
Yeah.
I'm in the military and I've got a small unit and we're going on an objective or a mission. I'm in charge.
Yeah.
You know, it's not an RSVP. You can't say no. I'm not inviting you to a party. We're going, right? The Bureau, same thing. Hey, I make a decision that we're going to go and take down this particular group and we have the evidence and we're going to present to the United States Attorney on this date. I'm not inviting you to do it. You're going to do it. This, though, with strong memories of a good man, right? This Jim Martello was a good man. By all accounts, I don't know him. I wish I did, but like my stepson Thomas said, that would have been really weird. But, you know, if you think about that challenge of letting someone else set the pace in life, you know, I can't now say, no, we're going to do it like this. No, you're going to remember this way. You're only going to do this, and you're going to act like this. And here's what Jim DiOrio, you know, how Jim DiOrio raised Jennifer and Jimmy DiOrio. So I'm going to come into
doesn't work.
bullshit,
like
you know, and it shouldn't work that way. But it's a challenge, right? So how do you let kids set the pace? Well, you think about a guy like Adam Schefter and how he did it.
I got to read that book.
Oh,
I knew nothing about that
It's a
story.
wonderful book. And, you know, I take it a little bit further. I was talking to a guy who we worked together years ago, different agencies. He lost his 20-year-old son at West Point. And the story's been publicized. C.J. Morgan, Christopher Morgan, cadet at West Point, phenomenal wrestler. He was a wrestler. He's a West Orange, New Jersey resident from Chicago. They moved when he was in early stages of high school. Became an outstanding wrestler at West Orange. Was offered, you know, a scholarship. Well, everybody's offered a scholarship, but was offered a spot in the wrestling team. Recruited. Freak accident. A truck rolls over. He's in the wrong seat. Period. All 20 others walk out. CJ is killed. Right. So his dad is the most, and his mom, most faithful, inspirational people you can possibly meet. And we were talking a little bit about Adam Schefter and his view on things. And Chris Morgan said something to me that I'll never forget. I said, I wish I could have known him. I wish I could have known CJ. Because the only time I saw CJ, Army-Navy wrestling match the year before he died, he was in his Army wrestling uniform, and I was in the front row watching the match, very excited. By the way, we pounded Navy. And the national anthem starts. It's different at West Point. It's not like anywhere else. There's no clapping and, none of that bullshit that I hate. You stand at attention until that thing is over. Put your hand over your heart. There's no clapping for anybody, nothing. You sing the friggin' song, period. And you think about what it means when you stare at that flag. And I hear a voice that's above all other voices. And I look over C.J. Morgan singing belting the national anthem out, top of his lungs. And I remember that. So when he was killed, I kind of said, was that the kid? And everybody said, yeah, that was CJ, wow. Right? So now I kind of telling the father that. And I said, I wish I could have met him. And he looks at me and he says, Jim, someday we will. He said, but for now, we live our lives and we remember his. Fuck. That's big.
Yeah.
And I've tried to do that.
Doesn't get bigger than that.
At the house. I've tried to do that with Jim Martello. For now, I wish I could meet him, and I will someday. I believe that.
Yeah.
But for now, we live our lives and remember his. And that's powerful.
It is a absolutely, I don't even know the word, but everyone remembers that day who had the ability to remember, if you weren't 3 years old or younger. But I was very young. I think I was like 6. But it is ridiculous to think about the fact that there were two buildings that were whatever they were, 2,000 feet, whatever they were, very tall buildings that within 102 minutes went from being standing in a clear blue sky to being gone.
Gone.
And I remember, it is something I make sure that I relive that at least once a year. And usually not like around September 11th. It's usually some other time during the year because it was that was really an event that shifted a lot of things in our world and has us here. Like that butterfly effect, you can draw a lot back to September 11th. But
Absolutely.
The craziness of people who, these aren't people who were in the army going out and fighting in Afghanistan or something at the time. Like that wasn't their life. They were here doing a job, right? And they went to work. They had families. They had kids. And all the other people who were there that day and who had to see that or who lived anywhere near that. And the stories I've heard from friends over the years who were right there or in the fucking buildings, which is insane to me. I remember, while it had always hit home, I was sitting, where were we? We were with a client. I think it was, what's not Liberty National? What's the other one right there? Bayonne.
Yeah.
Bayonne Golf Club.
Yeah.
Yeah, or Country Club.
Yep.
We're sitting on the back deck with a client, and you can see the full, this is in Bayonne, New Jersey, great golf course, by the way. And you can see the full southern Manhattan skyline right in front of you, like you could reach out and touch it. It's real, that never gets old for me. I fucking love that
Likewise.
thing. But the guy sitting with us just looked at, like there was a moment of silence for a minute, and he said, "It is fucking crazy that there were two buildings that used to be right there where that blue one is." And I don't know why. This is 15 years after the fact or something. I mean, I've relived this over and over and over again. Not like I was there, but, you know what happened. You know what it was. You knew people who died there. And it's like I looked at that and I went, holy shit. It is this wild, wild thing. And one of the things I think gets kind of missed in the story. I mean, you talk about it from a very personal level, perhaps the most personal level minus being married to the person who died that you can have. And the thing is, a lot of these agencies, whether it be the FBI, even the CIA, DEA, all these different places that suddenly had to, no matter what happened in the past, everyone had to spring into action and respond to that. And I would love to talk about some of that with you. You already mentioned a little bit, but there was such a personal nature to it, not just because it's like, it's our job to protect people, and that day we didn't, we failed, but you also knew a lot of people in there. You especially like the field offices too, like the New York FBI field office. You don't think that was the most personal thing that's ever happened in the history of that office? Absolutely. It will never be topped. I mean, I hope to God it never gets topped.
Agreed.
So there was this whole other level, such that when people went overseas, like you were one of the guys who started going overseas after that.
Yeah.
You're taking that with you.
Always. And I mean, it's you bring up, you bring the emotion back with what you just said. And I think everyone, it's like the day Kennedy got shot, right? Everybody that was in that generation remembers where they were. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. But the thing that makes this so different is that they just were trying to do for their families, better themselves. The first responders. Yeah. Those guys, if you see the pictures from the stairwells, they didn't know. Who knew that this would happen?
Nobody knew those buildings were coming down.
I mean, then you think about the Pentagon. The young officers, the
which
enlisted
we forget
personnel.
About, too.
We do forget about it. Or those people in Shanksville, PA, right, who died an awful death.
Yeah.
So when
heroes.
But when I went down fighting, went down
yeah,
swinging,
man.
right?
That's
went down swinging. So when you really think about kind of how much that was put, especially us in this area, right? It was put in our face, but it was put in the whole country's face. I can remember we were bringing teams of FBI, what they call evidence response teams, in from different parts of the country to volunteer to do a couple of things, a couple of the worst duties in the world. And if you remember too, there was that other American Airlines jet that went down in Brooklyn. You were young, in November of 2001, and they made this thing. And they made this
2 months after?
Yeah, in Brooklyn, killed a bunch of people on the ground, killed the whole flight, right? So
Wait, I know nothing about this.
it's great. It's a crazy story, but going to the Dominican full flight, think a 767 or maybe even something a little bigger, maybe a DC-10, takes off from, I want to say it took off from LaGuardia. I think it was LaGuardia or JFK. I can't remember now. We responded out to the scene shortly after, so it threw a loop into everything we were doing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not laughing at it, but so what happens is the official story is that the tail wing failed because of a prop blast or a jet stream from a big 747 that took off right in front of it. And supposedly, knocked the tail wing off. Come on.
Now that's the story.
You fucking kidding me? Honestly.
What's the real story?
So I don't remember us ever really looking. I know, listen, there's guys on presidential orders that may have looked into that. My belief is you're goddamn right somebody fucked with that plane, right? So in New York City and Brooklyn, killed people on the ground. So think about these people that came in to help us, these FBI agents who were serving in offices like Omaha, Nebraska, where their worst day was having to deal with rowdy protests outside the College World Series. Not to say that it's a big deal, right? Like a case, just to kind of give you an idea, a case that I would get in New York or Newark would be just me working on it. The whole office of Omaha would work that case. I had 10 of them at a time.
Yeah.
Right? But these people are coming in to help, and they're going to do a couple of things. They're going to log
culture.
evidence.
It's a
different culture.
You know what I mean?
But it's the same FBI.
It is
right?
the same. That's what's surprising about
same
it.
FBI.
But it shows you that still, even within something like the FBI, there's still
levels.
the 50 states out there.
There's levels, and it's baptism by fire, right?
Yep.
So, they're coming in and they're doing a bunch of different things, right? So they're asked to do cataloging of evidence. They're asked to pick up live cell phones that are beeping. They're asked to pick up jewelry that has information, wedding rings that talk about wedding date and who they're married to. We're picking up firemen's bibs, the garment that goes underneath, the fire retardant garment that goes underneath, with nobody in it, with no evidence, nothing, disintegrate, right? Picking up fire helmets, nobody, right? So we're bringing them from Omaha.
Ground zero?
That's ground zero,
Yeah.
right? And then later at the landfill.
Yeah.
But at the same time, all of a sudden, this jet goes down, right? And everybody's like, "Huh? What?" And now
I never heard
I've got
about
these
this.
same people. It's interesting. Dude, check it out.
Yeah,
You get a chance?
I have it behind you
Yeah.
a little bit, but I got to read through it. It's thousands of words.
So now we're asking those same agents. Now, a guy like me, 20 of us maybe in the Bureau with experience overseas in different capacities in different agencies and different organizations, you learn to just do the job. Now, it hits you later. It hit me after my mother and John died, right? We'll talk about that. But ultimately, I'm sitting in a morgue, and I'm responsible for first-class passengers' identification in that jet that went down here, right? And at the time, it's just matter of fact. Got to document, got to print if we can. Got to get DNA portions. Got to identify any clothing, any jewelry, any tattoos, any marks. But later, when you think about it, how this person who is a father, a grandfather, a brother, a friend, a husband.
How do you turn that
how
off?
does this guy? It's impossible, right? I mean,
But you do. But clearly, it's not because. And I get it.
Yeah.
You have a job to do.
Yeah.
You're in charge. You're in charge.
Yeah.
It's all. It's terrible to put it this way, but it's all evidence. It's all part of a case. That is what it is. And so your job is like, all right, how many wedding rings did we recover? Okay, well, we recovered that. You know what I mean? And book it, seal it, get back to it later when you got to build it. But to your point, there's the emotional side of it that you can come to grips with later and maybe have like a catatonic breakdown about it, which I wouldn't blame anyone for having. But how do you not have that when you're seeing it? I'm always amazed, and I don't know if amazed is the word, but it blows my mind that guys like you have the ability to kind of almost like great athletes in a totally different setting, right? Where when they step between the lines, that thing happens and they're a different person. You know what I mean? Like, is it kind of the same?
I think it's similar, and I think the only other part that kind of adds to it is that what we talked about earlier, right? That service piece, that duty piece, that's ingrained in you, whether by your parents inherently. It doesn't mean you have to go to the service academy to get it. There's plenty of us out here that do it, but it's doing what you're supposed to do when nobody's looking.
Yeah.
Right. So if you were to think if you were to sit and think on it, you're like, what the fuck am I doing this for? Right? I mean, there's no case here. Like, what does it matter? It does matter for a couple reasons. Because if you're the daughter or the son or the husband or the wife, you want to know.
Yeah.
So I'm helping you to close. Same shit I do now. That's why I couldn't last in corporate America. What am I doing? What am I doing in corporate America? Who gives a shit about certain things? But when I can make your peace of mind, better, then I'm happy. And I'm hoping you're happy too. And that's my value. And when I finally thought about that in that fashion, what was the value in sifting through, bringing teams out, looking at stuff? The value was we're bringing in some form or fashion, we're bringing peace of mind. And as I've gotten older and I've gotten, the guidance from my wife, who's incredible with what she does and how she does it, she has shown how important closure is, how important ceremony is, in order to kind of grieve properly and to move forward in your life so that you can live a life. Like Chris Morgan Sr. said, for now, we remember his, but we live ours, right?
Yeah.
That's the same kind of thing.
It's hard to do.
It's hard to do. So I think that's what I don't know if I was thinking that way at the time. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if I was thinking that way. But now, in order to heal that PTS, right, in order to kind of heal from several areas of my life, I've looked at it that way. I've kind of looked at it as I added value. I made a difference, right? If there was a person who I was with when they took their last breath, or if there was a person that I was with when they had surgery to remove a limb, sad, yeah, but who am I to fucking, be, affected me? Now, I'm not taking anything away from veterans because I how much I do for veterans and how much I'm in the middle of that. So, but I'm saying, like, that's my impact. That's my value. And so money, that's why I have so much trouble saying, that's going to cost you $15,000, But what I do know is...
You never had to do that.
No, but what I do know is I guarantee you now, the only way as a civilian what value is cash. It's the only way you know it. You don't know it my way. Now, I'm hoping to educate you as a client and say, look, there's some other things, man. Like,
You're
there's
better
some other
at that.
people.
You're better at that.
Yeah,
now.
I'm better at it.
Like,
Yeah.
I would always I would call you with the craziest shit. Like, yo, Jim, I got something in cyber right now. And you'd be like, you know what? We'll get to the bottom of this. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it'd be like, well, I got to give that to my guy. It's going to take 5 days, so he'll have to bill like 10 grand. And then I'd be like, okay, well, that prices me out. But I'm imagining all the people calling you up who, like, it doesn't price them out and stuff. And you're still just like, all right, let's just get them taken care of. Yeah. And you're not thinking like, all right, well, what's my value here? What do I charge? Because, I mean, no one else is doing this.
It's a hard thought, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's a hard thought. And it's not a normal thought for me. It's never been. But now it's kind of like I'm seeing that I'm adding that value through a monetary transaction. So I'm more excited about it, right? And it's taken a while to build, but now I kind of get it. So I'm going, yeah, this is good. This is going to work. Yeah. I just think it's important for all of us to think about those that we meet on the street who look like they're suffering and who and we all see them, day to day, week to week, month to month, to just reach out, if you can. And I know it's a hard time, right? This country's going through some awful shit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you can't add your value, whatever that value is, and you know what it is. And mine is the ability to kind of ease some pain, whether it be physically, whether it be mentally, whether it be, things that are keeping you up at night, right? Things that are just like, the one thing, we all have it. And I think back on my time in the Bureau, and
you're talking, by the way, I just want to make sure we're clear here.
Yeah.
Because the context of this was talking about, dealing with people who just, you're a part of a case, but they experience loss and everything. But you're talking well beyond that. You're talking about where when you do some jobs like Ray Donovan or something like that, where it's like leverage, it's these are people coming to you who run major corporations or have international issues, and there is that thing that keeps them up at night that has them in cold sweats. And so it's a part of, like, you use the same mentality of easing mind in the grieving process where you had to do that to easing mind in how you do the job, saying, hey, that thing, I got it.
Absolutely. And you and I have talked detail. I mean, listen, I shared with you a lot of detail about things I've done, right? Yeah. And you see that link, right? That little piece that kind of helps ease your mind, puts it to bed for a minute. And same thing we do with our families, same thing we do with our kids. You'll see at some point in life, you do anything to ease, their kind of burden while letting them grow, right? So it's the same kind of deal. So in a way, if you think about developing and nurturing sources and informants and assets, it's kind of the same thing, right? So
psychologically.
So when unless you're a fucking sociopath, psychopath, which we have, don't get me wrong, I've dealt with a few of those too, but unless you're that way, you're always in the back of your mind thinking, fuck, what if I get caught, with that one thing? And then the day comes. And I always tell them, this is the worst day, because tomorrow we could start over. You could start rebuilding, and I'm going to help you. Now, who in God's name wouldn't take that and say, hey, there's an FBI guy who's going to help me out. He's going to guide me through the process. And in the meantime, I know I don't attach myself to the outcome, but I know what the fucking outcome is.
But the thing is, it's not like there are people out there who I guess are like, and this isn't working on some of the stuff you're working on, but they'll be like a private investigator for lower level things than you deal with. But it's like, it's on them. They have some sources at the police stations and things like that. They have some guys like in some places, but like with you, it's like, hey, Jim, we got an issue in Saudi, and you're like, all right, I got so-and-so on the line, and so is a step below the president, or your buddy from West Point, or somebody you did a case with in 2002 who now is in charge of crazy NSA shit that they'll never tell us about. So it's like the access that you have and the relationships you have there, and also understanding who's competent and who's not. Yep. I've never met someone like you. I don't rule out meeting someone like you somewhere down the line, but you got to know a lot of fucking people to get to a guy like you, because there are not many in this country.
Well, I mean, listen, and there's still I appreciate that. And there's still things that kind of, I get shit, am I going to be able to do that? But just happened before we came on. I had a phone call from somebody who, fellow West Pointer, and we were looking at something real dicey in all over the place in the news, right? And the break came, and it's just because.
What do you mean the break came?
The info that we thought we were going to struggle to get, we got. And we got it in a way that is unexpected, but yet powerful, yet impactful. So it allows several people today or tomorrow, whenever I wind up talking, they don't even know it yet, but whenever I wind up talking to them, to say, ooh, wow, guy means what he says what he means. Yeah. And follows through on things, to get it done. So I think that goes back to kind of the way my dad was teaching us always to kind of look at every single person you meet as somebody of value. Somebody that you should treat the way you would want to be treated. Because
no matter who they are.
Doesn't matter. The way he always explained it is like a bank account. And I remember I would walk with him to the local bank, and when they had passbooks, you put in your $5, or you put in your Christmas money, or my grandma used to give me like $1 a week when she'd see me, whatever. I go walk over, put it in. And he'd say, see this? This is important. And he was teaching a lesson, but I didn't get it until years later. And I asked him, I said, is that what you were teaching? And he would say, like, hey, look, you're putting money in here. Someday, you might not need it tomorrow or today or next week, but someday you're going to need it. And if you don't have anything in here, there's not going to be anything to take out.
What was that old quote you had? Familiarity and politeness.
Politeness breeds access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's spot on, because what you're talking about right now is, and you've talked about it this entire time, it's been a consistent theme, like even talking with some of the, sitting across, as Leo would say, sitting across from some of the craziest, hardest motherfucking criminals. You're sitting next to these guys, and you're not thinking about it like that. You're not thinking about like, oh, this is the sociopath who did this is the mobster who did that. You're kind of like, all right, what can I get from this guy? how can I get this guy to trust me? And I'll reciprocate. You know, it's not like you're just doing, and this is interesting because it's an interesting psychology to it, but when you're trying to get that from the mobster example you used,
Yeah.
you're talking about giving him like, oh, we're going to go lighter on you. We're going to make a deal because
Absolutely.
you're going to help us out. So it's not like you're saying, oh, how can I fuck this guy?
No.
Right? Yeah. I mean, obviously you want to get more out of it than him.
It's over
but
by
yeah.
then because the investigation, the journey is much more powerful than the destination. You know, so it's kind of like, and the other thing, like there's general public when they watch TV show, especially a law enforcement based show, and they see they're like, oh, look at that, the FBI's making deals or whatever. You know, you got to remember, you got to go through the U.S. Attorney's office. They have to make the deal, which our director fucking forgot. But anyway, so
Comey.
Yeah. So, my
Talk
thought,
about him.
yeah, my thought is always this, right? My thought is kind of like along the way, I kind of ease my extreme, my mother would never let me say hate, extreme dislike for the person I'm actually taking a look at. It's funny, it's counterintuitive because as the evidence becomes stronger, I become less pissed off at you. I don't hate you as much as I thought I did. Then when you finally meet the person, you've kind of let that all go. So now it's like, now who could this dude get me to? Who could this guy get me to? Because I already like kind of washed it in my mind.
I think we started with this somewhere earlier in the conversation.
Yeah.
Then you said some deep shit and we went with it.
Yeah.
But is there a game to it? 'Cause I
1,000,000%.
Okay.
Minimization.
Let's talk about
Minimization.
This. Let's talk about this.
That's the game.
Because, and I think the exact line I used, because I think about it a lot, is cop needs a criminal, criminal needs the cop,
Yep.
world goes round.
Yep.
I look at these things without as much emotion or leaving as much emotion to the side as I can. And what I mean by that is I look at the world and there's 7.5 billion people in it or whatever. And it's like, yeah, do I want all of them to be great? Do I want everyone to sing Kumbaya and have a great life? Absolutely. I understand there's evil in the world, though. And guess what? It's not 10 people. It's more than that. Unfortunately, this is just the law of large numbers and the law of averages. And so I realized, okay, well, evil's gonna do some evil, and there's gonna be some bad shit, and then it's got to get handled. But when you see the law, whether it be the police or the FBI or the CIA, and they're going after people who are bad, it is a job to do. But and we also touched on this, but there is a job of like, okay, well, you have to get the result. So how much of it, when you're going into this, do you think you can sometimes be blinded to, oh, this guy must have just done everything wrong, even if you think you're building a case against him, and not consider like, wait a second, is it this guy or is it somebody else? Like, do you get lost in that because you're like, yo, we got to get a result here, or we're not getting the next promotion, we get fired.
That's a great question, and I think it's something you ponder. I won't say day to day, but you ponder it in your career over the course of a cycle, right? You think about what's really important, and then you have these great leaders that show up in the FBI. Like the guy who's managing New York right now, Bill Sweeney, right? You've got guys like that who look at the impact more importantly than the stat, right? Because I can write. Listen, I can take a case. An ambulance fraud case, let's say, where they're using, they're billing for services not rendered. And I can stat the living shit out of that for, $50 a pop.
Yeah.
What fucking impact have I made?
Yeah.
Nothing. But I can also take a look at that mobster, that terrorist, that white-collar Wall Streeter, who now I have convinced, because I've let go of my anger during the journey, I can now convince, hey, man, you and me, we're teamed up. And by the way, and here's the key, the minimization part that we talked about.
Yeah.
And the best example I'll give you in a minute. But by the way, man, if I had all that fucking money at my ass, I'd fucking take it too. I'm going to be honest with you. I need it.
Do you mean that?
No.
Yeah.
But like my buddy said one time.
You
and you
could have been a great actor.
You know my buddy, right? You know my buddy. We won't say his name.
Friend with the what? Our friend with the toupee?
No.
The one with the jelly rolls?
No, he's up. I don't even want to, but I called him on my way back from arguably my most surprising and impactful search warrant execution on a public corruption case in my career. we knew the guy, elected official. We knew the guy was taking cash bribes. And it's publicized.
Oh, you told me about
It's publicized, right?
Yeah.
It's publicized. It's out in the paper. I mean, took the biggest cash bribe in the history of New Jersey, and probably, to
Are
be
you allowed
honest,
to say his name, I assume?
I mean, I won't because he's suffering right now. So.
Okay.
But ultimately, we think that he took, in our investigation, we found about $465,000 that we believed he took over the course of 18 months in a small town in Monmouth County, in order to provide zoning / planning board approvals, right? So that's what we believe the amount was.
Yeah.
So we walk into this guy's house and we start executing the search warrant. And he looks at us and he says, right out of the box, first thing he says, tell him, hey, you're not under arrest, but you can leave if you want to, but today your house is ours. And we said to him, if you want to just sit down and behave, you can stay. But if you start acting up, we're gonna boot you out of here. We're not gonna arrest you because we have nothing to arrest you on right now. So he looks at me, and the first and only thing he says, you can't, the search warrant doesn't include my garage. So I said, fantastic. I said, so the money's in the garage. And he looks at me and says, you can't. So I said, hold on a minute.
Why would he ever say that?
Because his lawyer told him, hey, it's a detached garage, so if they come in and they only have a search warrant for the residence, you can't go in there. Bullshit. It's for the whole property. So I immediately get his lawyer on the line, dial him up. I dial up U.S. Attorney, let them talk for a minute, come back, and I say, hey, bad news. We're going in the fucking garage. Now, do you want to make it easy? And do you want to allow me, the courtesy to not destroy any of your locked cabinets, which we'll put back to where they're as best we can, or do you want to just tell me where the money is? He says, I want to tell you. I said, okay. I said, let me just ask you this. What do you think, just amount, because I've got guys that have to count it here. What do you think you have in the cabinet? And so he says, well, my wife, by the way, a younger wife who was a stripper, who was another gift from the people that were bribing him.
Huh, nice.
Well, my wife spends it as fast as I get it. All right. How much you think? Can't have more than $300,000 in there. Okay. So we open the cabinets and we're all like, holy shit. Just picture like a garage, your typical garage, 3-tiered cabinet, locked doors, each tier being able to hold, cases of soda, or think about that, right? Packed with cash.
Hundreds?
50s, hundreds. Very few 20s. No 10s or 5s. No singles. Which is ironic because she was a dancer. But anyway. So
not anymore.
We take and we count, and we have our guys there, and they go through the whole process. They got the bank machines, and they count everything out. And I said, what's the number? 3? Whatever. Come here. Sir. Boss, come here. Yeah. So 1.6. $1.6 million.
And she spends it as fast as he gets it.
So I said, holy shit. Okay. So we get it all, we do everything we're supposed to do. And now the point of the story was I call our buddy.
It was really 1.7. You guys walked out with
Well, no, I call my buddy and I said, you're not going to believe this. And I tell him the story and he says, just like this, in his typical little mobster way, Jimmy, you should have called me. He would have had $300,000 in there.
Oh my God.
So which I said, dude, never, shut up. But that's
you can never fully trust them.
But that shocked. Think about where I had been leading up to that case in my life, and that shocked the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And that's a peaceful one.
That's one guy.
That's like a white collar
accountant. This white milk toast idiot who got caught up in the world of go-go joints.
Yeah.
And here we are. So, and his life has unraveled because he never came on board fully.
Yeah.
We had some meetings with him and we kind of sat with him and he promised to tell and never did. So his life, and that's my point is, you can get to the level with a guy by just being able to minimize, right? And he never took to that. So I'll give you examples of like great minimizations, like especially the guys who do it best. We had a serial bank robber who was getting more and more violent who we caught. And guy was good. Like he was like Mission Impossible good, right? And they're going at him pretty good. And it reminded me out of the scene like Vic Mackey in The Shield, like the opening scene, if you remember that from The Shield.
I never really got into that show.
Kind of gives a really bad, you should watch it. It's really good.
He kind of looks like you, though.
Yeah. So Vic and I are similar, right? But not really. So the scene in that is guys are going at this guy who molested a kid, right? And they're trying all these minimization tactics, like, hey, she looked pretty good. I don't know if I'd be able to, whatever. And it's not working, right? Because he knows, because he's a guy I think he was like a child psychologist or something, right? So
great.
They come out and they say to Mackey, hey, we're having trouble. And he says, let me give it a shot. And so he goes in the room and he just methodically starts pulling down, blinds and closing things. And he goes over to the camera and he kind of puts a rag over the camera and he turns around and the guy goes, oh, he goes, you must be, good. You must be bad cop.
Yeah.
And Mackey just looks at him and he goes, it's funny. He goes, good cop and bad cop, they went home for the evening. He said, I'm a different kind of cop. And then he proceeds to just whack him, in the back of the head. And he comes out, 2 seconds later, he goes, he's ready to talk. Not saying that's just bullshit. Never happens.
That never
happens except overseas, but it never happens.
Whoa,
right?
Whoa.
So
we're going to come back. Happen. We're going to come back to that.
It does happen.
All right, finish the story.
So,
we're going to come back to that.
Long story short is, you now have a situation where you've got this pretty stoic African-American serial bank robber, getting progressively more violent along the way. So I kind of watch what's going on, and nothing against my boys. I love, many, many local, county, state detectives who are great guys who make great cases. But, I kind of have always had this style that my dad I guess it's inherent from my dad because I never saw him. He was dead before I could talk to him about interrogation technique. But when I watched some old videos of his arson interrogations in the late 60s in Newark, same style.
Yeah,
same style.
There were a few fires in Newark back then.
Yeah, exactly. Just mirroring and minimizing and going, which is a powerful tool, mirroring, right?
And by the way, side note here, but because the FBI and these agencies, there's so many people in them and they're all siloed off and everything. So sometimes like there's some really famous guys I'll bring up and them. Do you know that guy, Chris Voss?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know
him. You were basically, he
trained me.
He was the hostage side.
He's a hostage guy.
And then you were doing the interrogation side for like terrorists and
stuff.
Correct.
And we just missed each other, during our powerful times. But good guy, great book. I think it's getting to what is it? Never split the difference. Never split the difference.
Yeah, great
right?
book.
So great book and great guy and does a great job. So ultimately, this guy, they're going at him like crazy, and he's just
nothing.
This is what he's doing.
Yeah.
So they came out and they said, "Well, we're frustrated, whatever." And I said, "I'll go sit with him for a little bit," So. And not blowing my own horn, but I kind of just knew that if I could build a relationship or any kind of rapport through mirroring, which is a really powerful piece. So whatever you're doing right now, I'm doing. If you do this, and it's amazing what happens.
It's verbal and physical.
Yeah, people start to respond. Perfect example, I'm in Atlantic City. You know the Borgata where you kind of pull in for valet, and there's that one piece coming in and you're coming up. So Sheila's driving. So Sheila's driving, and nobody's letting her in. Right? And so a guy has to stop up here because they stop him. The valet stops him. And he's got his arm out the window. Right? So we could see him face. He's got his arm out the window. I said, chill, roll the window down and put your arm out. I said, why? Just do it. Window, arm out. Fuck guy up.
He waves you forward.
Lets her go.
Yeah.
Right?
It's very
So mirroring
powerful.
101.
It's very
so
powerful.
I say, let me just go in and sit with him for 10 minutes. I sit with him. So I walk in there, and this guy's good he's got 18 jobs he did. We know it's him, but we have nothing. When I say nothing. Not even similarity on the jobs.
Do you think he knew that?
I don't think he knew. I just think he figured, hey, I've been there, done that before. He's a career criminal, but getting better,
Clearly, yeah.
right? So let me just go and sit. So we go in and sit. First, he only asked me one question. You a lawyer? I said, no. That was it. Didn't offer anything more. So he sits back like you are. Start doing it.
And so you do that.
Yeah. So then he goes. I go. 15 minutes.
Silence.
Silence. Finally he goes, what do you want? What do you want?
So he came.
So I go, nothing. I'm just sitting.
Pull that mic in a little bit.
Yeah. Nothing. Just sitting with you. I'm just here to sit with you. I didn't really, not look at him.
This is a fully dark room.
Well, it's like this. I mean, it's a little light. Got the handcuff bar, so he's cuffed to the bar over here, on the side. All right, 15 more minutes. Everything he does. And you go, oh man, just about the bank robberies. I'm just sitting here, bro. This is the shit duty I get for fucking being here. Can I help you out?
What?
No, I don't want any help. Okay. 15 more minutes. Going through the same thing. Finally he goes, what the fuck do you want? I say, I want you to fucking write down the bank robberies because I want to go home. I'll give you 3. Done. That's it. So an hour. So I walk out and there's a couple of my buddies from a Monmouth County Police Department, and they're just like, you are fucking insane. What did you do? I go, you saw me. You watched it.
Just did him.
I just did. I totally mirrored and minimized, and after the 3, I just said, damn, these guys thought you were like a fucking serial bank robber. You only did 3? What the fuck?
Yeah.
Shit, I wouldn't arrest anybody for 3. You're nobody. You're the same as the guy we had last week who tied the fake grenade around his neck, And he goes like, he couldn't, but he could. No, I did. Everything.
Now,
minimization.
I think, I can't remember. I want to say it was number 42 with Miles Matthews.
Yeah.
I didn't say your name, but I said you were going to be coming on at some point because we were talking about.
I watched a piece of that.
Okay, so maybe you saw this part, maybe you didn't, but I think it was like an hour 40 into the convo, something like that. But we talked about interrogation techniques and how they can be, again, for same theme, like for that result and get people to say things that they didn't do. And so, again, you are going in there, and in this, it sounds like an example like this. You knew this fucking guy did this. This wasn't...
And that's the Bureau, let me tell you, the FBI, when we come knocking at your door, you're fucked. All right?
And that's the
Trust me, it's what we go through in order to get what people think, I could just listen to your phone. Bullshit.
Okay, but
Bullshit.
But
so, yeah.
It's like anything else in life, because I agree with you.
Yeah.
And once it gets to the FBI, it's like, all right, there's some kind of big case here, right?
Yeah.
But there's still the 1%. There's still the case where it's like, well, no, we know something happened, but like, oh, it turns out it wasn't this guy or something. And so, and I know it's probably rare. It still happens, though. And I think about this because we have seen, in the criminal justice system, which a lot of people talk about these days with some of the things that are wrong with it. Obviously, look, I look at this thing pretty high level. I've talked with a bunch of people about this. I can say on one hand that we probably have the best criminal justice system in the world. And then also say it needs some massive improvements in things.
Agreed.
And fuck if I know how to do that.
Agreed.
Right?
100%.
So one of the things that I think needs massive improvement is that I've seen far too many cases where great interrogators who their job is to get a result. I get that, but that's that gamification thing I talk about where they go into the room being like, this motherfucker, I need to walk out of there and basically have the crumpled up piece of paper and mic drop it on the desk and say, case closed. And so some people, we've seen famous cases with this, they admit to things they never did. And then maybe they go on death row about it and shit. So I think about this because you just gave one of the best examples you could have ever given in a story, because that was one of the purest psychological mind fucks you could have ever done. You just physically, and people who were listening and not watching that, go watch that portion, go look at the timestamps you're at and go watch what Jim just did. Jim was just physically monitoring and then repeating, and in your words, mirroring, which is what it is, every single thing this guy did. And maybe it took a half hour, maybe it took 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever it was. Eventually, this dark, closed room where he's just sitting there with the guy, something unlocks in his brain to want to be honest about things. And so the same kinds of things can unlock in somebody's brain to want to just say something in that scenario to be able to help out the person across from them who clearly is on the same wavelength.
I
So
get it.
do you ever think about like, hey, sometimes when we go in there, you know, we're going for that result in the interrogation itself, and maybe someone will say shit that they didn't do.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point, and that happens. Listen, it happens. It doesn't happen in my world, and I'll tell you why. Because when I go in, I know what I need to hear from you, and I know the buttons that you're going to either try to push or I'm going to try to push, right? It's a game. But it's also a game that comes with highly corroborated, independent information, which I have access to.
What does that mean?
So before I ask you a question, I better know exactly what happened. And I better have 6, 7, 10, 15 forms of that proof right now. Think about some of the things that have happened to the FBI in the last, since I left. No, coincidence.
Yeah.
No. But if you think about not being prepared, not understanding everything about the case better than they understand it.
Yeah.
I got to understand what you did better than you do. It's the same way a defense attorney works. A great defense attorney becomes an expert on every piece of his client's life.
Yes.
Because he needs to talk about that. And I can tell you one guy, and I'll mention his name. He's getting a little older now, but he's the best in the world as far as if something happens to me, this is what I'm showing up on this guy's door. Michael Critchley in West Orange.
Okay.
Critchley, I've gone against him 3 or 4 times. I've been cross-examined by him for days on end. When Michael Critchley would give, after me working on a case for a year plus and tightening every lid on every piece, having 20 different independent corroborations of each fact that I knew was in place. After his opening statements, which were usually an hour, most guys go 3 or 4 hours at a time, I would look at the people, the federal prosecutors that I worked with, and say, fuck, maybe the guy didn't do it. That's powerful shit.
He was that good.
He was that good, right? So if you think about taking that back to how you work a case and how you prepare, a lot of that, what you talked about, and I don't mean this against anyone in particular or any type of detective, whatever, is laziness. So I'm going to try to make you say what I don't already know. That's not what it's supposed to be. It's not what it's supposed to be. I come in to talk to you or interrogate you about things. Now, I may find out a few things that I may not have known, but I guarantee I thought about before I came in that room.
You're confident about that.
I guarantee I thought about it, right?
Now,
but I'm
by
not,
the way,
if you say something that's not true, I'm going to fucking know it. No, you didn't do that.
To be clear, you're also a ridiculous example to talk to about this, and that's why it's hard. Like, I wanted to bring it up, as I said on the previous podcast, but it's kind of hard to do it with you because you were one of the 3 to 5 leading interrogators at the entire bureau. Like, you were one of the best in the world.
I felt I was pretty good at it, and I felt my strength was in my preparation. My strength. So if you did say something that you didn't do, I also have to know that you didn't do that. Because if I'm not prepared and I'm maybe not doing my job as best I can, I might accept that, which now we're going down a whole different path. If you give up something that I don't know that you didn't do, and you're saying you did it just to maybe either get the fuck out of the room because you're sick of dealing with me, take a hit for someone else, whatever the MO, whatever the motivation is behind that, I have to know so that I can be able to put it right back at you. Listen, Julian, I appreciate it, man, but you and I both know you didn't do that, and here's why. Because at that particular time, remember you told me you were here and you did that, and I kind of know.
Like this,
yeah, and here's the video. Here's the video of you at that time there. So,
is this exactly how you did it?
Just no. And the other big thing that I kind of hit on before, right? My dad as an interrogator never raised his voice, even as a dad, right? And what he would do is when you got to a point where you would start to deny something he knew you did, Julian, hey, don't say no. Let's get away from no, right? Because we both know that's not true, right? So don't say no. Well, I never knew that. I watch Ocean County Prosecutor Joe Coronado comes on the job a few years back, calls me up and says, I don't know if you remember me. I said, Joe, I remember you used to come to our house in Belmar, sit on the porch, play cards with my dad. He goes, your dad basically developed me as a young prosecutor, And he says, I have some old tapes of your dad's interrogations. Would you like them? I said, well, I like them.
Yeah.
Quickly, right? I watched those crying because I'm like, that's me.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Because it wasn't any different, huh? As you're pointing out, it was still like,
Jimmy,
you know,
don't say no. You did that, right?
Exactly.
But I took that to that level, right? I took that to a professional capacity. So I think that's the difference is we have to get better. They have to get better because I'm no longer there, right? But they have to get better at preparing and not just cowboying and not just, hey, I hope this works out. I'm going to throw this at them and see what happens. There's very rare instances where that should be utilized or that works. And I have once in my career, and it was, we were at wit's end. We knew he did it, but this guy was good. And we basically said, we went outside, we talked to the prosecutor, and we said, prosecutor who's now a federal judge, great dude. And we said, we're going to try this. And he said, do it, see what happens. So I walked in the room, walked behind the guy, and just said, you took $300,000. He turned and said, no, I didn't. I took $400.
What?
And the lawyer says, that's it.
Why did he say that?
We don't know.
You said one thing.
I said, this is after 6 and 7 hours of him saying, nah, I never even knew that guy. You took fucking, and there's name to it. You took $300,000 from a family. No, I didn't. I took $400. And the lawyer says, you can't use that. And the prosecutor says, we absolutely can, bro.
Of course you can. The lawyer
he lied to me the whole time. It's a proffer, right? So you're king for a day. They call it king for a day.
And it's lying to an FBI agent.
Correct. But you know, you say in the proffer agreement, you sign anything that's being used. Unless you lie to me, we can't use. So if you tell us everything, we can't use any of it unless we prove it differently or we prove that you lied. You fucking lied the whole time. So we had it. We used it. We convicted him on it. Went to jail. 72 years old. He went to jail for 8 years. Came out. He's still living. But ultimately, I think that's what law enforcement can work and do better. And we've all seen opportunities, right, recently in the news, what law enforcement can do better. Yes. Just common sense, not cowboying. Somebody asked me a while ago, Jim, if you were a uniformed police officer and you know many of them and you respect many of them, and the scenario had occurred, what happened with George Floyd, regardless of the fact that he was stoned, he was whatever, he was this, that, right? How would you have handled it differently? And it's very simple for me. I would have simply said, Mr. Floyd, you got a minute? Can you just step in the car for a minute? You know, which he would have complied to. Just take a seat in the back seat. I want to work some things out. Done. Over.
Quick question, from a.
And I know that's controversial across because many of my law enforcement guys are going to be like, "What the fuck? You don't know." I do.
You don't know.
I do know. Yeah. I ran the civil rights unit for the FBI for a year and a half. I do know.
Yeah.
And it's simple, right? And here's my.
You don't ever want it getting anywhere near that point.
No. Here's my greater kind of disappointment and absolute horror. Why did not one other Minneapolis police officer turn and say, Derek,
get the fuck off him.
Derek, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
We don't do that here. We don't do that. Always the way we were trained in combat situations. There's another day, and these shit'ems will show up. I'm not saying he was a shit'em. I'm saying these shit'ems will show up at a different time at a different place. And this is in the Army. It's not in law enforcement.
Wait, who's a shit'em?
You know, guys that are basically bad guys out in combat situations, right? Okay. You're in Iraq, you're in Afghanistan, you're in South America, you're in Africa, right? So they'll show up at another time because they're career shit'ems, right? And you'll have another chance to address this. Why go deeper now when you don't have to? And it's the same thing.
Some things should be such common sense, though, Jim.
It should be. Like, I mean, how do you not get off his fucking neck? How do you not do that?
You know, and my heart was palpitate, and I honestly, like, I've always paid attention in public cases, and like I care, but I'm not, you know, it's not life and death to me, and it's not like this one was life and death to me, but I'm just thinking to myself, like, before that verdict was coming in, I'm like, please tell me they're not going to fuck this up. Please tell me. Because there are just some things in life that are absolutely common sense, and I love that you bring up that none of the other cops said something, because
not one.
Honestly, I have just as much of a problem with them as I do with him, because the guy at that point was on, you know, he was on the ground, cuffed, and You sit on his neck
with exhaust blowing out of your exhaust pipe into his face.
I don't even think anyone said that, but yeah, exactly. Like that's just another layer. It's
another piece. 9.5 minutes.
I can imagine, and it's not like you're a cop. You did, frankly, a lot more than that. But as someone who worked in any form of law enforcement, you got to be looking at that, going, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
Yep.
I mean, it's just
listen, and I can't tell you,
me.
Julian, how many times sitting in that desk in the Civil Rights Unit in Washington D.C. a day. Not a month, not a year, a day, stuff like that comes in on police officers, right? And my whole sense of this is it's all about starting them out at the academy with a training kind of, scenario / curriculum. And, 3 of my classmates, we actually got together, Bobby Lockett, Billy Noble, myself and a guy named John Ponce. Great friends, great buddies.
Hey, Johnny Ponce.
And then Noble and Lockett, African-American guys, some of my best friends. My mother used to feed them during Beast Barracks with Pompeo and Antonetti and all those guys. We just sit and eat. She'd make Italian food. Bobby Lockett swears it's where he fell in love with any form of Parmesan. So it's great. But we have talked about kind of moving a curriculum into the police academies because here's what happens, right? If you think about it. Now, no fault of these young guys to be trained the way they're being trained, but what's important to a good young cop? The hands. Yeah. That's what makes you stand out. You box. You
Do you know how many hours? Do you know how many hours a year they're required right now?
Absolutely.
To train in a lot of places?
Yeah.
Like an hour.
I know.
A year.
But they never get that kind of training where
Agreed.
I put you through a scenario.
Yep.
It's exactly what I do. It's that crisis mitigation. Like, think about what Chauvin did for the law enforcement community, right? He gave us an opportunity to heal by doing what he did.
They're not passing that test.
But what I'm saying is, right, you got to go back. I agree. But you got to go back to kind of what, I have a belief that I've kind of fostered over time and nurtured with Sheila, which is called radical forgiveness. You and I have talked about this before. So radical forgiveness is the same shit's going to keep happening in your life with that reflects and pushes and triggers your core negative belief.
Yep.
Right? And things will happen in the world that will allow opportunities to heal. That's an opportunity. So when people come out and say they don't understand why George Floyd,
why are we failing? Because Jim, it's been a year. This is my issue.
I know
because and that's why and I get it. I get the anger on the sides. I get it when people
there's some shit that goes over the top. Let's be honest. It's bullshit.
Oh my God.
And I can't stand that opportunistic view of let's get what we can. Fuck that. That's
absolutely.
Bullshit,
there's
too.
always bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. I just had Ashton Larald in here a couple weeks ago, and he's got very strong opinions on that.
I'm sure
because it's for him, he's just. He gave an exact line that I hope people listen to because I don't want to take it out of context. Like he said it and explained it. He was like, when I say this, unfortunately, when I say fuck cops, I mean every fucking cop. And then he explained and he goes, now I know that they're not all bad. But he's like, there's this old phrase that's been messed up in America because it's not what it originally was, where they say all cops are bastards. And he's like, that's not what it was. It emanated from outside of America. And it was, I think the exact line was, the police something has become, the police force has become bastardized. And he said, that's my point. You have, I love this one too. He's like, people talk about the bad apples. And he goes, the thing about apples is they can't talk to each other. And they can't tell on the other apples.
Right.
And he goes, so when I say fuck all cops, it's because the ones I see that are bad are not getting reported. And so the guys who aren't reporting them are just as bad. And he's like, until they until they sit here and actually acknowledge it. And you had a chance for 3 guys on camera who had a chance on camera with someone rolling camera to acknowledge that, and they didn't. When I understand when people see that, and then the anger comes out like fuck all cops. And look, I sit at it from the angle of I feel bad for a lot of cops because I know there are a lot of good. I know there are a lot of good ones out there.
Many.
But there are more bad ones than we think, and we're not everything you've mentioned, even just early on here. I agree with. It's simple shit. Number 1, the training. Number 2, more psychological evaluation to figure out who the hell you're letting in there.
Very true.
Because I got a strong feeling based on what we know about Derek Chauvin's past now and some of the little patterns he had, he probably wasn't going to get on the floor. Exactly.
Right. Just like a school shooter.
Yes. So
not just that was terrible, but same kind of evaluation, right?
No, I understand what you're saying. You're saying it's a psychological thing to be able to say, do you check this box?
Let's profile
or
that guy.
Yes.
Let's make sure in a good way.
And so I'm happy to hear you say that that's what we got to do, because I agree. I just want to see people do it. And that's why, like, I'll never get by, and I understand the anger with it, but, like, that's why the defund the police thing is so stupid, because that's going to do the opposite. Now you're going to have no training, you know? So you got to, unfortunately, in society, you got to pay for it. Like, you get what you pay for.
Absolutely.
So it's a hot button issue. We've talked about it on this podcast. We've talked about it with people on different ends of the spectrum with it. We'll continue to talk about it. But I think you sit in a unique chair because that's not your seat.
Yep.
You were a lot of rungs above that, but you still understand, like, okay, well, this is what they face every day, and this is what they should be doing, and this is what they shouldn't, and here's what the job actually calls for. And so when you see it bad, and like you said, and I'm almost surprised, I shouldn't be surprised to hear you say that, but when you were the head of the civil rights unit in the FBI and you're getting cases like that every day, think about that. Think about all the, and I think Ashton said this too, he's like, think about all the ones we don't see. That's what pisses people off.
2% you see.
Yeah.
But then, like, take it, let's be fair to the other side, right? You look at this young officer in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, God, yeah, 100%.
Right? And the whole LeBron bullshit, you're next, right? That, when I tell you from my training and experience, not only in the world of the U.S. Army, but in the world of law enforcement, when I tell you that is a absolute textbook job by that young
100%.
officer.
Yep.
A textbook. Now,
can you give people the context just so that just so that they know it was Nakia?
Yeah,
I forget her name.
I forget her name, but you know he rolls up on a scene that is already a mess. Right, there's people being thrown on. It's quick. I think it's 13 seconds.
It was fast.
Right, so somebody's getting thrown on the ground. Somebody's yelling, "I'm going to stab that bitch," is what you kind of hear, and then she proceeds to pull a knife and said, "I'm going to stab this bitch in the head." And he comes out, draws his weapon, and again,
shot, unfortunately,
what you'll hear in the stupidity of the press, you know, asking questions like, well, why couldn't you just wound or throw a couple of warning shots? We are not trained to do that. They are not trained to do that. I cannot tell you how many times.
How do you put out a warning shot with someone with a knife at someone's head?
And you shouldn't, because we're trained to shoot to kill so that we can protect that person who's an innocent victim. Now, I'll give you the other side of this, which a lot of people don't know. I would say, and this, I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but from my own count, what I've seen and witnessed, I'd say 80% of the time when there's a police officer who's gunned down, all right, and did not have the ability to fire his own weapon, 80% of the time, there is some type of training, some type of breakdown between his training and the actual incident. And here's what I mean.
Yeah.
When we train with handguns, now we train with rifles, we train with a whole bunch of different, we train hand-to-hand, we train with weapons, other weapons, we train with personal weapons, right? But when we train with handguns in the military, especially in the community that I kind of was part of.
And you were an Army Ranger.
Well, more on the civil rights side is what I'm talking. Civil affairs side, I'm sorry, which is intel.
Okay.
It's intel for the Special Operations Command. More on that side.
Okay.
Got it. So when we train for that, we train one very important piece with a handgun. When you expire your last round, what happens is, right, we all know there's a lockback. And you have to remove that magazine before you reload, forward, and get back in the fight. What happens from what we used to just destroy you, at least in that side of my life, when you reached and got the magazine and put it in your pocket before you reloaded. Now, why does that happen? Because you're lazy, right? I don't want to drop that thing. Have to bend down and pick it up later. It's a pain in the ass to do it. I'd rather just... 80% of police shootings, my opinion, where the officer didn't fire his gun, the magazine was pulled out, put on the ground before he reloaded.
And you know what? It's all back to the training. Like you were talking about the hand-to-hand training.
You're going to go back to what you learned when we tried to put a little bit of pressure on you. And then when it happens, there's a couple times in my life when I felt like that. A couple of times, you know, out in another place at another time. But I can remember thinking about what's it going to be like What's it going to be like when I report to West Point all these stories, right? You watch movies about it, you read books. What is that going to be like when I show up and they start the first time somebody yells at me, you know? And it wasn't half as bad as what it was shown to be prior to me getting there. Why? Because I prepared myself.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. What's it going to be like for that soldier the first time you hear a bullet whizzing by your head? Or that police officer when you walk into a room, or the FBI agent when you're on a search warrant for a child porn person and you walk in and that person will not remove their hands from under the sheets and it's going, what do you do?
In some way, and you know what? The thing I have to admit is that you can prepare the hell out of a lot of things, right? And you can be the best at it like you. There are still some things that you can't prepare for.
You can't prepare
right?
for. But if you train properly, it's the same kind of thing that I'm bringing to the typical client these days. Let's talk about it. And you and I have talked about this.
Yes. Yeah.
We've talked about professional athletes who don't ever think about what would happen if someone accused me of something I didn't do. What would be the first thing I would do? What would happen if somebody a police officer approached my car and, was treating me the way they were not supposed to treat me? What would happen if I was accused of something in the press that I didn't do? What would be your first move? Now, the time to do it is not when it happens. The time to talk about it is before. Just like we prepare. Hey, listen, guys, here's the thing, right? It's all well and good if somebody's attacking you and you need to kind of put them under control. You do what you have to do to get them under control. It's not good. It's not good once you've secured the person and you're able to talk to the person to continue on escalating that level that brings no good and that it's only harmful to not only you, the person, but nowadays, the country.
Completely.
And you got an idiot like LeBron James, making statements about a cop who did a good job. He's up.
That wasn't
Listen, not enough bad things can happen to that fucking guy. Honestly.
Look, I talk about him. Actually, we talked about this with Miles as well. I have a love-hate relationship with LeBron James because there are a lot of good things he does off the court.
Agreed.
There are a lot of good things.
Paying for colleges and different things. I agree.
Yeah, it's just when he does something wrong like that, he's got such a big platform that it's hard to not get pissed off. And look, I will say this. Obviously, he did no homework, and he said that on that scenario, and you can't do that because then he docks the guy. I mean, that's a fucking problem.
Yep.
But the really sad thing about it, and it goes back 360 to the training point, is that was the first time, even in other videos I've watched, and I'd have to think of some examples where the cop wasn't at fault, right? It wasn't one of those.
Yeah, it was a good job.
That was the first time, though, where I saw one where the cop clearly did the right thing, but also looked like he was trained.
Absolutely.
That was clinical.
Absolutely.
Whereas when you saw the Jacob Blake one,
right,
that was a donut patrolman.
Absolutely.
That guy had never held a gun. I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm sure he'd held a gun in his life. He was sir.
Exactly.
No fucking clue what he was doing.
Absolutely.
So it got to a situation it should have never gotten to.
Definitely.
But this one, it's like you look at it and at least you have one finally where it's like, okay. I mean, that sucks that had to happen. The girl was 16 or whatever.
Terrible.
But you can't swing. Look, you can't swing a knife at someone's head.
You can't do it.
Unfortunately, that's just a law of life.
That's it. You can't do it. You cannot do it. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's a pure training issue, and it's a paradigm shift. Making young law enforcement officers understand that they're better off here than they are here. Yeah. I think about, I never had to do anything in my law enforcement career in the United States of America that didn't come from preparedness and the ability to communicate. That's it. The FBI, when young people ask me, what do I need to be? An accountant? A lawyer, a military guy to be an FBI agent? No, you know what you need to be able to do? Talk to people. Practice that. Practice talking to people. Because the whole job, I used to kick my agents out of the office if they were sitting behind the computer. Get out, knock on a door. Get out and knock on a door. Go talk to, hey, I was thinking, hey, anything, I'm Jim DiOrio. I'm working this area. I was thinking about things, and I understand you had a little incident and might have. It's amazing what happens. It's amazing. Guy, he didn't have to do that. I do have some information, right? And that's it.
And see, this goes back to the same old quote about the access and familiarity, or politeness and familiarity breeds access. And you're talking about using the head and going there. And I wish they would teach this more at every level.
Likewise.
Because it
needs to be.
Yeah, that's how you form assets and things like that, like you've been talking about. But you've made this point a couple times, and I said we get back to it, where you keep on saying except overseas. And this is interesting to me because obviously the stakes on the things you're referring to are on a whole nother level, because you're also talking specifically about like dealing with like Al-Qaeda and some of the serious shit. But what do you mean? This is what I want to know first. What do you mean when you say that? Because technically we're supposed to still apply the laws of like rights over there.
And I think it's just comes down to my knowledge and my relationships with individuals who are serving on presidential orders, right? So, you know, what that means is that they report to one person and one person only, right? So if you think about that, think about that for a minute. You're reporting to the most, you know, what's supposed to be the leader of the free world, right?
Yep.
So, you know, that's my thought from conversations and from relationships and from understanding of things we've had to do under presidential orders, things they've had to do under presidential orders that have kind of produced that same nurturing of assets.
You're beating the shit out of people, though.
No, I mean, no, not at all. I mean, I think it's still here.
Look, I have a nuanced view on that. I believe in slippery slopes, and I think there's issues, right? So, like, the worst things you see are some of the things that came out with when they were doing all this I forget it, like the Gitmo or whatever.
Yeah, the Gitmo, whatever the prison was.
Like, that shit's wrong.
The prison too.
Yeah, and the people who got in trouble
Abu
with
Ghraib.
that.
Yeah,
exactly. Should have. And I'll put that link in the show notes.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's, again, that goes back to an understanding of, so you got to separate the outcome from the nurturing of continuous information, right? So results are an outcome. You can't attach yourself to that, and that's what law enforcement. I hate to, not all law enforcement, but many law enforcement officers / bosses, management, they attach themselves to results because results basically means promotion, and promotion in their world means money. Sometimes it means the ability to keep a department alive, right? Because you're reporting to an administration.
And you don't think on your end there was as much of an attachment to results? In
the Bureau? No. Not personally. You know why? Because I was a guy, if you were to ask right now, if you to call anybody that was in my, you know, time in the Bureau that was with me or around me or knew me, they're going to tell you that I wasn't a guy that, you know, was what they call a blue flamer. I wasn't looking to rise to the top. I was looking to nurture relationships. I was looking to have longevity in my source base.
I don't know if you said this earlier.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify here to make sure. But did that happen? That was something you always had, even pre 9/11?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. More important to me was always the relationships. Like, if you even talk to West Point buddies, they're going to tell you it was more important for me. And this stems directly from my dad. Because I can remember when I was a plebe, I said to him, I'm struggling, man. When I was a plebe, it's a freshman at West Point. It's the hardest year, right? So you're getting abused in every way. So I said to him, I am struggling. You know, I'm getting killed. I don't want to be here. I hate this place, blah, 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 right? And he said, do me a favor. Every day for 10 minutes, just get up from whatever you're doing, your studies, your PT, you're shining your shoes, walking the area, delivering mail, delivering laundry, learning your knowledge, memorizing the front page of the New York Times. Get up for 10 minutes. Go help somebody in your class. Doesn't have to be a lot. Like, hey, man, you know, I noticed your garbage is getting full, you know, because we had to empty our own garbage and do all this stuff. Can I get it? And watch what happens. He was right.
Yeah.
He was right. So I tried to carry that over, and I think I did, into the FBI, right? Like, instead of being a guy that just focused in on this sucks, this guy's an idiot, this guy's new boss is an asshole, which happens all the time. I used to say, look, give it 2 months because it'll change again. It's the FBI, right? So I think that's kind of what I say. I wasn't attached as much to the results. Like, we got to drive forward. We got to make this case. We got to shove a square, peg into a round hole and president. No.
And this is what I pressed you on earlier.
Yeah.
And it's kind of coming full circle again.
Nurture the relationships. Nurture the relationships, not only within the Bureau, but your source base, your assets. And you'd be surprised at how many times that will come back to help not only you, but society. And I always often, when I was kind of lecturing, there was a time when I would go in and lecture in colleges and high school and do different things. And I would say, what's your opinion, young people, this generation, of how, when you see, for instance, hey, there's a shooter that's escaped and he's, we don't quite know where he is. And then all of a sudden, like a day later, he's caught. How do you think that happens? And, a lot of times, like, the answer would be money. Just pay fucking people until they find him. Okay. You're not totally wrong, but how it happens is because guys like me, guys like Lieutenant Scott Samus from the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office, who I worked with for years, who's now retired, living someplace else. I won't say where he is, but
because at some point you moved, you did handle. There were a few years there where you handled all the big cases in like New Jersey.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
So we always built our source base to the point where, not saying that goes back to that deposits and withdrawals, right?
Yeah.
So not saying that we needed them right at the time, but we took care of them. So when something like when a kidnapping happened, when Anna Cardelphi disappeared, she was right after 9/11. She was kidnapped on her lawn in Spring Lake, New Jersey. Right? How do we find her? Think about that.
It's like a needle in a
haystack.
haystack.
Find her, right?
Yeah.
Well, how we find her is because we had spent so much time developing sources, nurturing assets, treating them like family, literally. Now, a lot of times, I still get messages, I still get cards from old sources saying, I hope you're doing okay. I miss our time together. You always treated me so professionally. Thank you for everything. These are guys that spent time in jail.
And you also, though,
right?
And I mentioned this at some point, but we haven't really gone into it because I also don't know what you're allowed to say there. So don't go into details that obviously you can't, that are confidential and classified. But those years undercover too, where you're out on an island for a job, right? And sometimes you're next to some stone cold killers on some of these things.
Could be.
Yeah, you had to be able to do that for survival. You had to know all these other people.
Undercover training is simply, putting you under a little bit of pressure so that you can rely on yourself for the first time and only time in your life, right? So, and it's like everything else. How do you rely on yourself? How do you build a safety net around yourself in any circumstance? Well, you gotta get along with people. You gotta know what makes people tick, right? Like, the blessing and the curse to that, for me, blessing is I can do that with about anybody. The curse is when I hate you, you fucking know I hate you. Period.
Really? I would think it'd be the opposite.
No. That's the blessing and the curse of it.
Well, because
I know so much about you.
You had to pretend you liked people, though,
Correct.
that you didn't like.
Correct. But at this point, what I'm saying now, after it's over, I often would say, I can't wait till there comes a day when I meet somebody and shake their hand and don't know anything about them.
Yeah, I think about that a lot.
And that to me is kind of peace. That's my peace of mind. I say I offer others peace of mind in my business. That's my peace of mind.
Yeah.
To just meet somebody and say, wow.
I haven't run a flow chart on you 6 ways to Sunday.
Right. And I really think I just want to hear what you have to say to not judge, but to kind of build our relationship. I want to know you for this. I don't want to know you because I looked and said, oh, Jesus, holy shit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want any more holy shits in my life. And I can choose that at 57. I often say, clients, it's so nice to be able to say, nope, to me. Now, I don't say it to them like, hey, I was thinking about it. I think there's another guy that can handle this a little bit better.
Yeah.
Right?
You want to handle what you want to handle.
And it's nice to be able to do that, have that first right of refusal. I've never had that before because like all my bosses in the FBI, here's a case. and you start to say no, and they say like I said before, not a party invitation. You can't RSVP. No.
Yep. Now, what about when you were a ranger too? Because I'm curious about that, because you guys, like, where did you serve? Because you were overseas.
Yeah, I was overseas. I mean, so most of my time, when we say that, I want to like separate it to civil affairs, right?
Okay.
So let me break that down a little bit. Civil affairs is the intel side of the Special Operations Command. So what do we do, right? What attracted me prior to the Bureau? What kind of attracted me to that? It was just what we just talked about. Kind of running everything out about a region, a country, a person, a group.
That's what I was going to ask about. So,
Right,
yeah.
right. And then getting to the point where you were able to pass on information that was impactful for the operational side. Now, did we serve in the operational side? Yes. Yes. Not all the time, but occasionally. We would be, especially in my Army days, right? And then later on, you definitely were in the middle of kind of showing, here's what we think, here's a method, guys, of counter surveillance, like stuff that people don't think about, or especially people look at it and say, that doesn't happen.
Sure.
That doesn't happen in, Gloucester County, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Want to bet? Because I pick it up from time to time still, because my brain still works that way, and be like, this fucking dude, like that'll happen to me. And I'm rarely wrong, because if the hair on the back of your neck, well, not that much hair goes up on me, but if the hair on the back of the neck goes up, guess what? It's that whole thing that you and I have talked about, situational awareness, the gift of fear, right? Fear is a gift. If you're walking down the street in New York City or in Philadelphia, and you see somebody and your hair on the back of your neck goes up, guess what? That's a gift.
Does that still happen to you?
Absolutely.
It does.
Absolutely. Not as often. But I think the last time it happened, and this, was my health issue. Had I not been,
that's a personal one, though.
Yeah, but it goes back to times it happened in situations. If I didn't have that and pay attention to what had happened in another world at another time, I might not have recognized I was in trouble.
That's interesting.
You know what I mean?
It all ties together.
It ties together.
Regardless of, I
was sitting like this,
context,
and all of a sudden they talk about that feeling of doom. Mm-hmm. I said to Sheila, we have to go to the hospital.
Okay, so separating that out, though.
Yeah.
Because, that's as personal as it gets. It's like, literally, like, am I going to live?
But
right?
I would, but there were other times that I had similar type feelings, pain, that I didn't go, because I knew the hair on the back of my neck hadn't gone up.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
But
there's times that it happens still like there will be
it's
a
like
time.
It's a weird thing in your head.
Absolutely. And one of the times personally I could talk about, September 15th, 2001, 4 days after.
Where were you?
So I spent a bunch of time, I was on site when that building came down, right? So we were going over.
Wait a second.
We were on a boat.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Okay, so basically we have a meeting that morning, 6 a.m. meeting.
September 11th?
September 11th, 6 o'clock meeting to discuss with New Jersey State Police Maritime Unit and the Coast Guard on Governor's Island. What would we do? This is crazy. What would we do if something were to happen? How would we build out a command post? So we show up at Newark Maritime Bay State Police. Good friends of mine. Sit down, we're having coffee, right? Talking about it. Now we probably 6:30 turns into 7:30 turns into 7:58.
Yeah.
And one of the guys comes in and says, it looks like one of the
it was
weird
8:48
or whatever.
Right?
No,
Yeah.
like one was no, I think it was like whatever time it hit. I can't remember. It's a blur.
I think it was 8:48, and then
it's a blur.
It went down at like the last one went down maybe at like
10 something,
10:30,
right?
something like that. Yeah.
So long story short, as he comes in, hey, there's something going on. One thing leads to another. Hey, this is after Tower 1. I think after the North Tower, right? North Tower was hit first. Went down second, but was hit first. So do you mind, he says, do you mind if we take it over to Governor's Island now? My dad works over there. I just want to see what's going on and see if I can get close. No, we don't mind. We're in Hudson Bay as
You're right there.
it comes over our head. Number 2 comes over our head. So now it's on, right? So a couple Secret Service guys, we pull out from under car, like a whole bunch of shit happens, right?
Wait, what was the Secret Service doing there?
They have an office space in World Trade 7. So now I'm in the basement of the Burger King on Church Street. When
So
it
wait,
comes
you're.
down.
I misunderstood that. You
Yeah.
said you were at Newark Bay?
Well, starts out in Newark. We go over through Hudson Bay, right into, right heading towards not Governor's Island.
So you're driving over there.
No, on a boat.
Oh my God, you were on the boat
Coast
when the
Guard-
second plane.
Yes, Coast Guard has a Coast Guard.
Because then those boats got people out of the city.
Yes. Not
You
only
were
those
on
boats,
one of those boats
not only
coming
those
in.
boats, but like Staten Island Ferry,
Yeah.
C Street,
Yep.
all that stuff. We were on a state police boat
Holy shit.
going over, so it turned into whatever. It turned into what it turned into, but I had a lot of that.
Well-
I had the hair going up on the back of my neck for the. I said to somebody, "We're at war, and those buildings are coming down."
What
they came down. I don't know.
What was September 15th? Though?
All right, so 15, take it forward, right? So, if you remember, there was a lot going on, right? There was the information with regards to people filming. There was information. There was a white van that was filming. It was being searched on Route 46 in Piscataway or up in like Morris County. All
they
these
were
things are
staying
going
in
back.
Patterson.
Yeah, all stuff
Yeah.
going on. The hotel, we're searching a hotel, whatever. So we get a lead. My specialized team gets a lead that there is a group in an Ocean County area that could be a cell
Yeah.
of some sort. I'm trying not to say too much because it's I don't ever want to be questioned on
Take
it.
your time.
So if you're listening, the committee that's going to evaluate me in a couple years, I know nothing about this. But anyway, that probably was the wrong thing to say. But ultimately, we go to the door of this place. It's a small apartment on a back street
In Ocean.
in an Ocean County town, popular town, and we knock on the door. Soon as we knock on the door, I hear movement. The hair on the back of my neck goes up, and it was right.
Who were they? Oh.
So that is an example of how I still feel that, and I credit that sense. And I also have it when I see shit like people kneeling on people's necks when they don't have to. I'm like, what are you doing? You know, or I've sensed it out, kind of helping with that whole gift of fear piece, like helping people. Hey, I would think about, whatever, being able to talk through that. So I find that translates. So it's kind of something that I'm able to find my value in being able to be that person for others without like going to work at Lord Abbott as the CSO, right?
Right.
Who the fuck wants to do that, right? Honestly, I love the guy that's doing it, but who wants to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? We have to make sure that the electrical panel has an extra set of breakers, because if the somebody's got to do it, right? And there's a nice Starbucks right next door, and you're on Hudson Street, and you got a bunch of assholes walking in and out. But at the end of the day, that ain't me. What I like to do at a place like that, as you know the story,
I was
is
just going to
test
say,
their security.
Can you tell that story?
Yeah,
Let's tell that story.
So test their
That's
security.
That's an all-timer.
Right? So we want to know how well they're insulated and protected. And of course, the one security, the only guy handling security is a guy who, whatever, right? So he tells me, he assures me, everything's good. Everything
It's all
is
beautiful.
good. You'll never, nobody, ever. Now, most people would say, well, I kind of trust him. He's a former law enforcement guy. But
And this is a Fortune 100 company.
Big
mind
time
you.
company.
And you're talking about their corporate headquarters.
Big, manages hundreds of billions of dollars,
Yep.
right? So most guys would just say, all right, I like them. Just noticing that picture of Post. Great guy.
That's your
But
boy.
that's my boy. So
Love that guy.
that's a challenge for me, right? It's not like I'm going to trust. It's nothing about trust. Like I don't trust the cop. I do trust this guy, former law enforcement. No, it's just a challenge. Let me see how good it is. So I put on I have a Toomey. Sheila bought me a Toomey backpack. Got a nice suit on, and I purposely I put one on my ankle my gun on my ankle, put one on inside the pants holster.
I
and
just
I
thought
put
of
two
another
more.
story. I know you can't tell.
Yeah,
but
you can't tell that.
Yeah.
I put two others. Yeah, we definitely can't tell that right now.
No.
Someday.
Someday.
When we're running that show down there.
Yeah.
But I put two more loaded in my backpack. Put it on my back, walk up, and here goes back to what we talk about, right? Politeness and familiarity breed access.
Yeah.
I walk up.
This is the front desk.
Front desk, supposed to be, this is good to go. Supposed to show your driver's license, supposed to get checked, supposed to check through your stuff. I walk up and first thing I say is, how you been? And the person looks at me and goes, a little bit confused. Good. Yeah. What a beautiful day. Man, this is the best cappuccino I've had. That Starbucks does a great job, whatever. I'm just going up, you know where I'm going. Yeah, yes, of course. Walk through the turnstile, no issue. So I'm through step one, right? Hit the elevator button, up to, I can't remember what floor it was. It might have been 11 that you had to get off and see a receptionist, right? Same floor that CEO and the entire C-suite is on, by the way, unprotected with staircase that goes both, whatever. But we straighten that out. But walk up, and there's a young lady sitting at the desk, and she looks up a little bit, and I say, how were the bagels I brought in last week? They were delicious. It's a new place. She goes, they were really good. I said, I'm just going in to see him, whatever. Now, keep in mind, and I want everybody to know, I prepared the one in the pants holster unloaded. I checked it 75 times outside of Starbucks, which is amazing that I didn't get arrested right there. But it is what it is. I know this one's unloaded. I walk through, say hi to his assistant, walk into his office, open up, he's on the phone, walk up with it, unload it, put it to his head and say, you are dead. We need to do something about security. and that triggered about a 6-week engagement that was fantastic.
How many minutes was that, front desk to desk?
Less than 5, 7, I don't even know. And that including drinking most of my cappuccino. So before I went in. Just that is, and I was told that was they were good. No issues. Now, the other side, what we did in a similar case is access again. Again, your politeness and familiarity breed the access. It says, right? I was able to get inside a private prep school in northern New Jersey and take a picture with a big-time executive's 2 kids. Oh. And I asked purposely when it came back, I'm on the board of that school, I'm going to have him fired. No. Not his fault. Your fault. For not putting it in place, something in place there. So now we're going to change it. Right? And all that was walking up to the security guy and saying, putting on a little fake Southern accent, hey, man, I'm just moving up from Charleston, South Carolina. I want my kids to go to this particular school because I hear it's well. I got dressed real nice. Basically told them money is no object. My parents left me a ton. It's old money. I haven't worked for it, but that's why I feel like this is the right spot because I want my kids to work a little bit. And he said, I really can't let you. I'm not supposed to. I just want to take a look around, man. It'll be 15 minutes at most. And you can walk with me. And he's looking. He's like, you could go. Found the kids, took selfies. They were confused. That
agreeableness, man.
Yeah, that's
People want to agree.
Went back and said, this is not good. And then same thing, kind of showing counter surveillance, watching the pattern. Where do you go? What do you do? What times do you do it? Like if you ever watched the show, and you should if you haven't, NYPD Blue, one of the best shows.
Never
in the
really
history
got
of
into it.
Fantastic. Andy Sipowicz, my hero, and he's telling his son. His son wants to become a police officer, so he's telling his son what's important about being a police officer, and he tells a story about Christmas Eve. And there was a guy that was worked at this toy factory, was coming out of the toy factory and had a toy gun. And he put it in his pocket. He was taking it home to give to his kid. And he said, had I not known the things that cops are supposed to know with their beat, I would have killed him. He said, but good cops know a few things. They know people. They know their people. They know their places. They know the things they do. And they know the times they do them. And that is the key. That is the key to everything about what I do for people. People, their places, the things they do, and the times they do them. That's the shit that will get you jeopardy.
But it comes back to the whole preparedness point that you're talking about. And there's another thing in there, though, that I haven't mentioned that I think is really important, and it comes from your West Point background. And that is the process, and then even to more detail, the chain of command of things.
Yeah.
And you talked about how some guys didn't understand or didn't do well the whole you have to give it to the special attorney and make the case, yada, yada, yada. And I wonder if that had to drive you nuts, working at a place as important as the FBI, doing what you did a whole bunch of things there. So whatever you were doing, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like there's supposed to be a process to all this stuff. There's supposed to be a way of doing it. And, you know, I think you hit on Comey a little bit. And Comey doesn't have he wasn't in the military, right? Like he wasn't a guy
He's a U.S.
like
attorney in San Francisco.
Exactly.
In the Ninth Circuit.
And I'm not talking shit on that. I'm just saying like
Ninth Circuit.
He doesn't
Every bad decision in this country is
Okay.
well, anyway.
Didn't know that, but okay. But he then becomes the head of the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And I already know that was an issue with, you know, some of the process he was following. But did you see it as a scenario where like he just didn't understand that? I don't know how I want to say this. I'm very confused how to say this. But essentially, you're like, there's a way we're supposed to do things here that get the desired results and make us have complete deniability of doing anything wrong because we do it correctly. And he wasn't following any of that. Is that slightly along the?
Yeah, I think you hit. You know, you hit very close to the issue. My thought is this, right? My thought is Jim Comey, in my opinion, was a narcissistic and is a narcissistic egotist. You know, that's what he is. So when you bring him on board, everything, his world is different. So it's going to look different. It's going to look different to the people that work there. It's going to look different to the people he deals with, either, that are his superior, his subordinates, people in other agencies. So what wound up happening is he felt like he was in a position where he could make a statement regarding prosecution as opposed to just making a statement regarding his pass along, his ability to discuss with, if you remember at the time, Attorney General was Loretta Lynch.
You're talking about the Hillary Clinton investigation.
I am, right? So
now, can I ask a question quickly, just for context?
Sure.
And if you can't answer this, are you allowed to talk about your?
No.
Okay.
No. So maybe at some point, but not right now.
Okay.
He is supposed to take the evidence that the Bureau collected. He is supposed to pass that along in some type of liaison-based meeting to indicate, here's the different things we found. Here's kind of our opinion, and we'd like to get your opinion on whether or not you feel it is chargeable. She, along with her first assistant and her staff, Loretta, makes a decision as to what they're going to do, if they're going to charge it. Now, they owe nothing to the public to say whether or not it's going to be charged, whether it's not. Many times, in most cases, the person who is under investigation, who is not charged, either it's never brought to the grand jury or the grand jury finds what they call a no bill, doesn't prosecute, doesn't choose to indict. Many times that person, that target, that subject never finds out. It just kind of goes away.
But the media got a hold of this one.
Well, but why though? Because Jim Comey stood up.
No, before that. I'm saying, like, remember when she was, I mean, you definitely remember, but she was put under investigation. I think this was summer 2015, and it came out that, like, she's under investigation.
She's
so somebody leaked
it. But doesn't mean she's indicted, right? It just means that happens often.
But you know how that looks.
Well, it doesn't matter because as long as many people are under the cloud, per se, but if there's an indictment that doesn't move forward, that's a private piece. The FBI director should not be getting out there making statements with regard to factual evidence and findings. It's none of his responsibility, or quite frankly, it's not in his job description. His only job is to go ahead and make that recommendation. He can listen, we recommend all the time. I used to go and fight with young U.S. attorneys and federal prosecutors and say, why the hell are you not prosecuting this? I worked this long. I did this. This is what I think. Here's what you should do. And at the end of the day, we came up with a solution. You know, we came up with, hey, either, Jim, I don't care what you say, we're not charging this. It doesn't rise to the level. Or, Jim, if you go back and get me this, and this, and you solidify it, which for me was never the case because it was always all there. But I'd say, okay, no problem. Take the 24-hour rule, come back, figure out what we're going to do next. Always worked. Always worked, right? So what he decided to do is take on, that would be like me getting out there, instead of saying I went and saying nothing, but me getting out there and saying, I just brought a case to the United States Attorney's Office, and I feel like here's the strong points, and we're not going to prosecute it because here's the weak points. That's not my job description. The FBI collects evidence in cases against the United States of America.
All right,
they don't prosecute.
Let me play some devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
What if he hadn't said anything, though?
Yeah.
How does that look? Because she was
make
running for the highest office in the land.
Make her do her job. Make Loretta Lynch do her job. That's how it looks.
What does that mean?
Make her. The U.S. attorney should stand up and say, we obtained this evidence from the FBI, and we decided to do X, Y, or Z. And that's still her discretion. She doesn't have to do that. She could just let it go, and it kind of fizzles out, and the news picks up on, the latest whatever.
Yeah.
Honestly, like that's her job. Her job is to take it, evaluate it, and she can get out there and say, look, we looked at this, and there was like 4 or 5 different points that they were looking at. Of course, they only publicized, a few things, right?
Yeah.
But make that decision.
Don't you agree, though, that it doesn't look, and this is not Loretta Lynch's fault on this, but Loretta Lynch was the Attorney General for an administration that had just employed Hillary Clinton as the Secretary of State. So no matter what she does, and not her fault, people from the other side are going to say, oh, she's just covering for her, regardless of what the result of the investigation is.
I think that's correct, but I also think it's not Jim Comey's responsibility and or discretion to do what he did. That's people are going to think what they're going to think, but they don't need to hear it from that boob. That's as simple as I can say it. That big, lanky, dope.
Did anyone at the FBI like him?
No. He started out, first couple of months, and we were like, maybe. He was calling agents on their cell phone, thanking them for casework. That was good.
Yeah.
But then it just fell apart.
And it's because he tried to put his stamp on it.
That's what I think. Just the narcissistic behavior just bothered me. His own universe. I mean, there was shit in the book. I'm not going to go page by page, but there was stuff in his book that it was just false. Material, substantively and materialistically wrong.
Well, what about, because
not factual.
That was, and I know there's some stuff we can't go to, but from what the public knows on things, I'll go there. That case had a lot of other messy things to it. I don't remember what the hell were their names, like the Stryock and who was the female
Peter
agent,
Strzok
Lisa Page.
And Lisa Page, yeah.
Now,
but that stuff is just listen, that's just that guy's an asshole, Peter Strzok. Period. Andy McCabe, good guy. So you have both sides. I like Andy.
McCabe was the glasses guy whose wife was,
deputy, Terry McAuliffe money, whatever. But at the end of the day, Strzok was banging that woman. He got caught, and he acted like a complete asshole.
But what they were doing on the way, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, texting about what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. Nonsense. No place for it. But, there's absolutely no excuse for that. And I won't provide an excuse. Yep. What I'll say is when you have a director that's doing that on a level.
What do you mean doing that?
I mean, he's doing the same thing. He's out there giving his opinion on what should happen, right? So not doing, who the hell knows? He's a boob. But that's just my thought on, my whole thought is narcissists struggle with the inability to be part of the front.
And you also know that well because generally speaking, I'm generalizing here, but I'm sure most of the people you work cases against were massive narcissists.
100%.
Yeah.
And it was, I would love when I would see that.
Yeah.
Because they're going to tell you what you don't know.
Because they can't help themselves. Like like the guy who's like, no, I took 400. Because it's like competition.
Thank you.
And I guess that was towards the very end of your FBI career where Comey was in charge and then fired and everything. But the thing I think about a lot, because the FBI has a critical role in this country. They're basically the chief police, right? Like they are the chief case makers. If it involves like bringing something to court,
the premier law enforcement agency in the world.
You're going to the FBI. And we now had, and there were too many things like this where the rhetoric turned into a knife fight and gunfight in public of, oh, are you team FBI or are you anti-FBI? Like the FBI is this shill fucking political arm, deep state organization, or no, the FBI is the FBI. And I think Comey has a lot of responsibility for that because whether it be just that action or frankly many other things and things he's done since that have taken away some trust in the organization. But now being on the outside, and I know how you feel about the FBI and a lot of guys you worked with, how do you deal with that, public backlash and say to people like, no, you can still trust the FBI. This deep state shit, look, there's a level of corruption at any big organization, but that is the exception and not the rule here.
Look, I often say the rank and file was never bothered by it. Right? We just did our job. Honestly. Now, I got the chance to see behind the curtain a little bit, and quite frankly, here's my view simply. My view is many of those in management positions rose too quickly and didn't take the time to learn the job. And when you do that in anything, in any part of life, you're going to make mistakes. If you're a plumber's apprentice and you don't know how to solder, you got a problem.
Yeah.
Because shit's going to blow up, right? So, but you want to be the top guy and get your card and be at the union hall every day. You don't know how to do the job.
Yeah.
How the fuck are you going to do that? So it's the same thing. So my thought is rank and file, man, we just cranked. It never even stopped us. Maybe for a minute or two, we'd look at each other and say, Jesus, because you'd get some of that. You go out and show your creds, you show your badge and say, hey man, FBI, I need to talk to you for a couple minutes. And they look at you like, we never had that before. And then you're like, look, I don't know, why you're doing that, but here's what we have. And you start talking and you show them your knowledge, you show them your professionalism and your impact. And next thing you know, they're like, gotcha, and they're appreciative of, hey, I didn't know, you guys are, wow, you guys are still on it. Yeah, of course. It's like the press can turn anything, right? I said, and I hate to use this, but 9/11. Think about 9/11. The summer before 9/11, all the press reported was these massive shark attacks.
Oh yeah,
Summer of the Shark.
Like yep.
Right, and then God forbid, God rest his soul, Jim Martello and John Salamone and those guys, Doug Gurian. But that happens, and all of a sudden, the sharks just stop biting. They were like, you know what? This country's been through a lot. We're not going to fight any swimmers anymore.
It's narratives. And there's
narratives.
Look, there's narratives on everything. And so I try to sit up here, right, 30,000 feet in the air and be like, okay. Just like when you're admitting there's evil in the world, right? Of course there's some things that are bad. Do I think there's probably some bad people who work at the FBI? Sure. Do I want to believe that, whatever it is, 30,000 people who work there, do I want to believe that fucking 20,000 of them are bad? Absolutely not. And that's what the media will have you thinking sometimes. They'll have you, their whole point is to sow chaos and sow distrust because that's what makes you fucking get angry and it sells.
100%.
But you look at other narratives that have been created and there's this line between transparency in 2021 and with the internet and how everyone has a goddamn opinion on everything, and also the government having to legitimately do their job, which sometimes is, frankly, it needs to be based on secrecy. That's why we have classification and stuff like that. So when you see some of these things and like some of the main symbols of them are just symbols and they're one part of a bigger issue here, but when you see things like Snowden or Snowden uncovered that they were, I mean, let's call it what it is, they were going around the U.S. Constitution and taking people's rights, and you see things like that come to light, or you see the fact that people want to hear about so-called rumors and rumblings that have been happening inside the NSA or the CIA, and you also know, having been in government, that like, no, there's a level to which we can't fucking talk about this. How do you even solve that in the modern day when you just have a ravenous eating media all the time that is going to simply continue to pound away at those things until you give in and do what you can in that way?
I think that, and that's a great point. And, I think about it this way, right? Your duty as a person in my position, many people in my position, is to not say anything, at all, to not comment, to not think about it, to not opine on any issue. However, we're all human beings, and there comes a point when our actions or our words are lending themselves to something that's bigger than ourselves. But I think the respect level comes in when we do show, our professionalism, our trust. You can trust me, our honesty, our ability to do things that people just don't want to think about, but know that they need to be done. What happens, and we've seen it in the special operations community, right? When guys start to kind of branch off and write books.
Yeah.
What happens to those guys? It's one and done. right? It's one and done because they talk about too much. They talk about too much. They give away things that are done in other places around the world in other times. And I often think about that. You know, I look at the guys that are doing a great job with it, Jocko, right? David Goggins. They're not telling you a lot. They're just telling you,
High level,
40,000 foot view of why it's important to always be prepared, why it's important to struggle through challenges so that you come out the other side and be a better person. And the world needs that right now. It needs guys like that. What it doesn't need is throwing out either dis or misinformation that is really a narcissist who wants to be in the know, if that makes sense.
Well, also,
should I know? I just don't feel like I don't feel there's any value to me saying it. Stuff I really know, because it's only going to have implications, for others. Right now, I mean, I like to think about how we can make an impact, how we can do things better, my experience lends itself to problems with police training. I'd love to be involved with being able to teach young recruits.
This podcast should be proof of that.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to do things, to kind of give peace of mind to that, middle of the road American who's not making billions, but he's in the $5 to $25 million range, right? And he needs help. And, like you and I have talked about, I kind of look at, and a lot goes back to my December 2nd, 2019 experience with the stents, right? And the almost passing. Thank God I didn't have a heart attack, but still took a toll. And it made me think about my mortality. And I think about the fact that I stopped taking, prescription drugs the summer of 2018 because I felt like I was physically on top of the world. Honestly, I was in great shape, doing anything I wanted to do, running, lifting at 55 years old. And the doc said, you got to take Lipitor. And I said, fuck it, take Lipitor. Nothing's happened.
Yeah.
Nothing's happened to me. What do you want to do, doc? You want to do push-ups? You want to go for a run?
Which Nothing's goes completely against what made you great at so many things you did.
Right.
Too. That's funny.
Right. So I say, I don't need Lipitor, bro. I'm good because nothing's happened. Well, that kind of resonates with me all the time when I meet a new client. Because the first thing they say when we start talking security, when we start talking situational awareness, cybersecurity, physical security, building security, travel policy, Jim, listen, thanks. I really respect everything you've done, but nothing's happened.
It's not Why would I do?
Nothing's going to happen to me. And I tell them the story and I say, if you don't take DiOrio, someday something's going to happen. So I'm your Lipitor.
And
clients.
You're going to take them.
You better take it because we don't want to be in a reactive position like we're in now where I'm scrambling to get your ass out of the well. We want to be in a proactive position so that we can assess your risks and vulnerabilities and your threats and we can talk about them. Why not bring it to the forefront?
I got to ask about this, and this is right on the detail because you and I talked right before we got on camera about this. But you just mentioned a couple minutes ago going into that tangent about misinformation and disinformation on the internet, which the ultimate tool now is information via technology because it can be used for bad and good, but it's used for bad all the time by people that don't like America and whatever. And obviously we use it on other countries as well. But you are. With J3, you've always done a lot of work in cyber, but now you are officially partnering up, if I understand, with one of your guys,
with a West Point classmate who's an amazing dude. So we are in the assessment business, man. I mean, I used to be in a position where I still wanted to stay in the game, and I will because I love internal investigations. That'll never go away from my portion of this piece. Yeah. But what I want to do is take a look at your life. And everything that goes about your life. And it's kind of like an executive, as opposed to an executive health, or executive wellness, it's an executive security program, right? So there's two things that are going to kill you. If you look at health, cancer and heart disease are going to kill you, right? So let's work on those. And there's companies out there, my buddy is doing that, doing a great job with it, just putting it together. Yeah. But on my side, on security wellness, it's your physical security and your cyber security that will kill you.
That's the key.
That will kill you. In every way. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you where you're at. We're going to might shake you up a little bit because you think you got it all. Nothing's happened.
I've seen you catch some of this shit in like 2 seconds before it blows my mind.
So let's figure it out and do these assessments. And then at that point, we can sit down and we can talk about, here's your problems, man. And it's a long process. And then at the end of the day, we get you perfect. We get you tight. We bulletproof you.
People don't, people even at the highest levels don't think it's going to happen to them. But I mean, you've talked about it before, the Bezos thing. When Bezos' phone got hacked by MBS in Saudi, it's
absolutely.
Dude, the people, even him, who's probably got all the does have all the resources in the world. Yep. He was missing on a very basic thing. And so the damage that can be done through cyber now, I mean, think about it. It's at the click of a button halfway around the world, or touch of a screen halfway around the world. It's not like the old days.
All the time. Yep. Every second of the day.
I love that you're like deep in that shit now. They're kind of getting you down.
Yeah, and I love having, Norm's a great dude, and he's a smart guy. And, together we've kind of put the whole program together. And we have strategic partners that can do any and all, right? So we find out, we tell you what's wrong, and then we work through it to make sure we got the perfect guy. Like today I was on the phone with a dude who's private aviation guy, right? He's Air Force Academy guy, flew for special ops. We flew together years ago, probably gave me a bunch of rides along the way. And he runs his own business out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. So as opposed to you having to jump on a commercial flight and be exposed to all the shit that's going on there, health, security, safety, right? Mm-hmm. All the shit that goes on, we can either take your plane, he can take your plane and fly it for you and make sure you get there and make sure you get picked up by the right guys and taken and transported. Or, he's got planes that he can fly you in.
Time, man.
Giving and not only that, but guaranteed that you're going to be safe. Guaranteed it's the safest you'll ever be in the air in your life. So that's the kind of things, J3 and West Point Security are kind of bringing together. It's good stuff. It's important stuff.
Yeah, like I said, I already seen you handle it.
Yeah,
where it's like, oh, I can do that. Now it's like, it's in the middle of what we do.
Absolutely, and it's better. It's kind of the whole reason that goes back to the fact why I didn't take a job for one company.
Yep.
Right, because I said to myself, well, I can help a bunch of people. Why not do it for a bunch of people? Well, now with these, with these assessments, I could do it for way more than a lot of people. Yeah. And get your stuff together. We already got, we've already pretty much engaged our first 3 assessment-only clients. We got
easy shit.
We got a professional athlete. It's a perfect mix that we're going to do it for. We've got a extremely talented and well-known doc, fantastic guy who we're going to do it for, and then we've got it for your typical high net worth, self-made guy who wants to see where he's exposed.
And you'll do some of these corporations, I guess, too.
Yeah, I mean, well, that lends itself. We get, listen, you get a professional athlete, and he says, we've talked about this before, right? He says, holy shit, you should see what this guy did for me. And then what happens? His buddy, who may play for the same team or somewhere else.
How many guys, I got to ask you this, though.
Yeah.
How many guys are on top of their shit as he is, though? Because he's next level.
He's not even. I'm telling you. Think about it, right? You're getting ready to, you're 25 or younger, and you're getting ready to sign something for multi-million-dollar, hundreds of $1,000,000 money.
Yeah.
Right? And like people have said to me, there's 2 things if you could figure out, right? You'll be a billionaire. Get rid of the hangers-on in that world, which we can do. Because the due diligence I do is beyond to scare the shit out of you. And then the second piece of that is kind of take care of the footprint on social media. And you and I have talked about this, right?
Yeah.
And I finally found the people that could do it. Special operations guys. Yeah. Not only could they get rid of it, they could find out who did it.
Ooh, so I got some work for you.
Right. So
I might need a little favor, Jim.
Yep. So my that's from my standpoint, that's kind of where we're going on that front. And at the same time, each of those guys' investments, you get a pro athlete who's involved in sponsorships, involved in charities, involved in different investments. Yep. We're going to handle all that for that person. Now he turns and says, wait a minute, I got this guy or I got this guy, and it's an interesting world, right? And so we can bring everything from, I've got event security guys, I've got executive protection guys, I've got, dudes that can do hard ass internal investigations, independent. I've got guys that there's nothing that J3 / West Point Security, we're not sure what we're going to call it, but
I got to get you out of here in a minute. And so we're going to close up because I would take what you just said right there and we'd talk for like an hour and a half.
I feel you.
But we're going to you're going to be a regular here, as you and I have talked about, and I wanted to just give people a taste of you today, so this was like cocaine all over the place, and that's great. What I really want to focus on in the future is especially like things going on, so foreign policy stuff going on, things going on with the alphabet agencies, and stuff like that, and get some specific, like, okay, here's what's really happening, here's what I know that I can talk about, here's how I would handle it, here's what we need to focus on, and give people really, I mean, you're going to be my guy with that, so I'm very, very excited about that, and we'll do a bunch of that. And I was even just thinking about the Garment District story when you went up and said, I know, and you can tell that in the future. You don't have to tell it right now, but that just describes you so perfectly, because you really, if people aren't getting it out of this, I've said it a few times today, but you're such a cowboy in this way. Like you want to roll, baby. And you just want to do cool shit.
Needs to be done, man.
Which is awesome. But the one thing I did want to say before we go, cause it's just hilarious, but also great, is that on top of all this, you're opening up Jersey Mike's. Like what? How the fuck does that happen?
It's the best. I mean, we've been wanting to do this. So my oldest, I shouldn't say my actually the oldest boy in the family, but my youngest. So we're a blended family. Sheila and I, we have 5 kids, and he's been bothering us for a while to open a Jersey Mike's, because he worked at Jersey Mike's through high school, through college, in corporate selling franchises, and he was like, Dad, we could do this. And so it happened. And we opened in December of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, pretty much. And we're local in Gloucester County. And
that's hilarious that you came down here.
It came down here, and we are crushing it. People love it. We came to Hoagie Land and are selling subs. So I think that tells you what kind of job that they've done.
And you got Schatzman and his offensive and defensive line.
Absolutely, we got
Schatzman's
subs. Entire team running it. We've got some wrestlers. We've got we're filled with township kids, and we love it. And it's just been doing great. We're hoping that this is going to be the first of many franchises. Jersey Mike's is just a service-oriented company. I mean, when I looked at other opportunities, I said, hey, man, the way these guys run the company.
Your son's killing it, too.
He's doing
He
great.
loves it.
He's doing great.
So you can just be that passive, like, all right, you ready for another
I come down
one?
once in a while. I work a lunch. You know, my wife comes down. She'll organize and work a lunch. We've got one of our other kids who's now become extremely interested in the business, and we think he'll be a guy that can take us to the next door and the next door and the next door. So we're fired up. So,
I love it. And that's over in Washington Township, New Jersey.
Over in Washington Township, right across from the Turnersville Auto Mall. That sounds like commercial.
That's
but Jersey
good.
Mike's, come see us. Ask for Jim DiOrio, and he'll take care of you. We're called the Golden Hammer Family Group, and if I got 2 seconds, I want to tell you why. Right? So in Italian, DiOrio is of gold, and in Italian, Martello is hammer. So Jim Martello, who died in the towers, is really our kind of inspiration for this, because he has given us the ability, both spiritually and bringing us together, kind of to take this on, and it's been a wonderful bonding.
It's like a family.
As I talked about before, right? Being a stepdad, right? This has really been here, and on the golf course, we find our way, and so it has been a blessing. And I know this guy. Thank you, Jimmy. I mean, I know that this has really been a big kind of springboard for our success, not only as a business, more importantly as a family, and for that I'm grateful.
That's awesome. There's not a better place. It's like you picked up this nice hobby now, where it's also like your family gets to be a part of it.
Exactly.
And it's fun. It's a community business. That's awesome.
It's the best.
Well, Jim, we'd be in here all night. We'll definitely do this. Can't wait. I want to do this pretty soon, like maybe 3-4 months down the line, when some more shit's happen and we can talk about it and get 100%, into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're my guy. You were my guy. Now you're my guy here, and now you're everybody's guy that listens to Trendifier with Julian Dorey. So,
love it.
Jim, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll do
Appreciate
it again.
Looking forward to it.
Everybody else, give it a thought. Get back to it.